Pacific Airlines Flight 739 was poised for departure from San Francisco to New York. In the bustling terminal, passengers hurriedly made final adjustments before boarding. Among them was a 7-year-old girl with blonde hair and curious eyes, tightly gripping her father's hand. She wore a light blue dress, a serene contrast to the frenetic airport ambience. Her father, a stern figure, appeared distant, engrossed in his phone. Inside the aircraft, flight attendant Daniel meticulously prepared for takeoff. Tall and exuding a welcoming demeanor, Daniel was renowned for his ability to navigate any situation with poise and courtesy. He traversed the aisles, checking overhead compartments and ensuring passengers were settled. Approaching row 12, Daniel noticed the girl and her father settling into their seats. The girl's gaze met his, her wide eyes revealing a blend of curiosity and something deeper, perhaps a silent plea. Daniel smiled warmly before continuing his rounds, though a lingering sense of unease persisted. As the cabin hummed with chatter and subdued laughter, Daniel returned to the front to conduct safety instructions. His glance returned to the girl's father, now more engrossed in his phone than his daughter. The girl, however, appeared unsettled, her eyes darting around as if seeking an escape or answers. As the cabin doors sealed shut and the aircraft taxied down the runway, Daniel found himself unable to shake thoughts of her. Though he had encountered many children during his flights, there was something uniquely compelling and concerning about her demeanor. Once airborne and the plane stabilized, Daniel resolved to keep a vigilant watch over row 12. What had seemed like a routine journey was poised to unravel into something intricate and unforeseen. Unbeknownst to him, the flight attendant stood on the precipice of a journey that would irrevocably alter both his and the girls' lives. With the flight cruising smoothly, Daniel embarked on his first beverage service round, offering drinks and snacks to the passengers. Approaching row 12, he noted the girl's growing agitation. Her gaze was wide, scanning the cabin as if in search of something or someone. Meanwhile, her father remained absorbed in his phone, oblivious to his daughter's increasingly restless state. When Daniel offered beverages, the girl seized the moment to speak to him. Gently tugging on his uniform sleeve, she whispered urgently, "Sir, can I talk to you?" Daniel crouched down, meeting her eyes with a gentle smile. "Of course, what's on your mind?" he asked kindly. Glancing nervously at her father, the girl hesitated before confiding, "I'm scared. I don't want to be here," tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Before Daniel could respond, the father's cold gaze interrupted. He swiftly pulled his daughter back to her seat, admonishing her firmly, "Don't bother the flight attendant, Emily." Daniel nodded understandingly and withdrew, but concern weighed heavily on his mind. Continuing his duties, he kept a vigilant watch on row 12. Something was amiss, and he was determined to grasp the situation better. Returning discreetly to his station, he observed Emily closely. Soon Daniel noticed Emily engaged in secretive movements, using subtle gestures with her hands, hidden from her father's view. Attempting to discern her message, Daniel found himself unable to fully grasp the meaning. Intrigued and increasingly anxious, he resolved to seek assistance. During a brief respite, Daniel retreated to the galley and phoned Sarah, a fellow team member. "Sarah, I need your insight on something," he began urgently, outlining the situation. Sarah's brow furrowed in concern. She might be trying to communicate something crucial. "You've got to find out what it is without alarming her father." Armed with Sarah's advice, Daniel returned to the aisle. Emily appeared increasingly frantic, her signals more pronounced and urgent. Daniel understood he had to act swiftly yet discreetly. Time was of the essence to uncover what the girl needed to convey before it became too late. With a resolve to assist Emily, Daniel devised a subtle approach. Equipped with a notepad and pen, he pretended to take drink orders as he approached row 12 once more. Near the girl, he covertly penned a message, "Are you in danger?" Shielding the note from her father's view with his body, Daniel showed it to Emily. She glanced at the note, then at Daniel, nodding ever so slightly. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. He needed more clarity. Continuing his rounds, he discreetly observed Emily from a distance. She resumed her hand signals, this time more distinctly. It took Daniel a moment to decipher, but he eventually pieced together the words she was spelling out in the air: "Help." Confirming his suspicions, Daniel knew swift action was essential. He returned to the galley, briefing Sarah and asking her to cover for him briefly. Sneaking away to a nearby restroom, he waited for an opportune moment when Emily could slip away unnoticed by her father. After a tense few minutes, Emily managed to slip out of her seat and rendezvous with Daniel in the restroom. In the confined space, she finally disclosed, "My dad, he did something bad. I don't want to go with him. I'm scared." Her voice trembled with fear and uncertainty. Daniel comforted her, his tone reassuring. "Emily, you're safe now. I need to understand more to help you." "What exactly did he do?" he inquired gently. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Emily revealed in a hushed tone, "He took me without my mom's permission. He said we were moving somewhere far away, and I'd never see her again. Please don't let him take me." Daniel's heart sank, realizing the gravity of the situation. He held Emily close, promising to protect her. Returning to the cabin, Daniel discreetly informed the pilot of the urgent circumstances. The pilot promptly contacted authorities at the destination, arranging for police to meet the flight upon landing. With the wheels in motion for Emily's safety, Daniel reassured her during the remainder of the flight, ensuring she felt secure until they landed. After Emily returned to her seat, Daniel maintained a vigilant watch as the flight progressed. The unfolding mystery heightened the tension on board with each passing minute. As the aircraft continued its journey, Daniel focused intently on row 12, steadfast in his determination to ensure Emily's safety until they reached their destination. Meanwhile, her father remained oblivious, immersed in his phone. Striving to maintain composure, Daniel busied himself by jotting notes in his pad. Swiftly outlining a plan for the flight crew, he emphasized the importance of discreetly monitoring row 12 and keeping a watchful eye on Emily without arousing her father's suspicion. The tension mounted with each passing moment. The flight felt interminable, and Daniel understood that any misstep could further endanger Emily. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, but he was resolute in his determination not to falter. Midway through the flight, unexpected turbulence jolted the plane, causing passengers to grip their seats tightly. Emily looked to Daniel with wide, frightened eyes. He offered a reassuring smile, hoping to convey a sense of safety. Once the turbulence subsided, Daniel noticed Emily's father scrutinizing her more closely, sensing something amiss. Knowing he needed to act swiftly to avoid arousing suspicion, Daniel approached Sarah discreetly. "We need to maintain calm. Her father is becoming suspicious," he murmured. Sarah nodded, swiftly engaging nearby passengers to divert attention from any potential concerns. Returning to row 12, Daniel brought a cup of juice for Emily. "Here, this might help you feel better," he said softly, offering her the cup with a warm smile. Emily accepted it gratefully, offering a small smile in return. As Daniel moved away, a fleeting sense of relief washed over him, though he remained vigilant, knowing he must be prepared for any contingency. Approaching the cockpit once more, Daniel briefed the pilot on the urgency of preparing for a swift and discreet disembarkation upon landing. With the presence of law enforcement waiting, the ensuing hours were fraught with tension. Daniel and the crew orchestrated their actions seamlessly, camouflaging their intentions within routine tasks. Each passing minute seemed to stretch into eternity, yet the plan was underway. With each coordinated step, Daniel clung to the hope that they could resolve everything safely despite the looming threat. As the flight approached its final destination, Daniel observed Emily growing increasingly agitated. Though her father remained absorbed in his phone, occasional suspicious glances toward Emily betrayed his growing concern. Daniel understood they were running out of time and needed to proceed cautiously. He sought out Sarah, who was serving coffee at the rear of the plane, and spoke urgently. "Sarah, we need a plan to separate Emily from her father as soon as we land. We can't afford to wait for the police. We have to move swiftly." Sarah paused for a moment, considering her options. "We can use the disembarkation process as a distraction," she proposed. "I'll announce a technical issue that requires everyone to exit quickly. It should create enough confusion to separate Emily from her father." Daniel nodded in agreement, recognizing the strategy's potential effectiveness. He returned to monitoring row 12, ready to act. As the plane commenced its descent, Daniel discreetly prepared for their next move. Leaning closer to Emily, he whispered, "Emily, when we land, we need to move swiftly. Trust me, I'll keep you safe." Emily nodded, her face a mix of apprehension and tentative trust. Daniel returned to his post, nervously anticipating the landing. When the aircraft touched down, Daniel felt a surge of relief and adrenaline. The plan was underway. Sarah's announcement prompted passengers to hustle toward the exits with heightened urgency. Emily's father stood, clutching her hand tightly. Moving swiftly, Daniel approached them and calmly intervened. "Sir, let me assist your daughter with disembarking. It'll be quicker and safer for everyone." The father hesitated briefly, but amidst the commotion, he reluctantly acquiesced. Daniel grasped Emily's hand firmly and guided her towards the front of the plane, his pulse racing with urgency. Every moment was critical. As they disembarked, a discreet group of undercover police officers, masquerading as airport personnel, stood ready. Daniel entrusted Emily into the care of one of the officers before turning back to confront her father, who was beginning to comprehend the unfolding situation. "What's going on?" the father demanded, suspicion etched in his voice. Daniel remained composed, replying firmly, "We're ensuring everyone's safety, sir. Please come with me." With swift coordination, the police moved in to apprehend Emily's father, detailing the circumstances while Daniel escorted the girl away. Emily glanced back at Daniel, still apprehensive but visibly relieved to be away from her father's grasp. Watching her being escorted to safety, Daniel felt a rush of relief flood over him. The most challenging part was behind them, yet there remained much to resolve. The revelations surrounding Emily's father and his actions had altered everything. Now, Daniel was committed to ensuring Emily's continued safety and seeing justice served. The organized chaos of disembarkation began to dissipate as passengers were directed towards the terminal. Daniel watched intently as undercover police officers escorted Emily's father to a secure area. Suddenly, the father realized what was happening and tried to break free, shouting angrily, "You can't do this. She's my daughter." Emily, hearing her father's voice, cowered behind Daniel, who stood protectively in front of her. "Please stay calm, sir. The authorities will explain everything," Daniel said, attempting to defuse the situation. But the father was uncooperative. He struggled and managed to break free from one of the officers, advancing towards Emily with a furious expression. The surrounding passengers began to step back, frightened. Without hesitation, Daniel placed himself between the father and Emily. "Stop. Don't make this worse," he said firmly and authoritatively. The father hesitated for a moment, but his rage seemed uncontrollable. He tried to push Daniel aside, but before he could advance, the police tackled him to the ground, quickly handcuffing him. "This is a mistake," he yelled. "She's my daughter." As the father was taken away, Daniel knelt beside Emily, who was crying silently. "You're safe now. Everything will be okay," he said gently and reassuringly. Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. Daniel hugged her, offering the comfort she desperately needed. He knew she was about to face a whirlwind of emotions and that her life was about to change forever. Moments later, a police officer returned to talk to Daniel. "Thank you for your help. We'll take care of Emily and ensure her safety. You might need to give a statement about what happened during the flight," the officer said. Daniel nodded. "Of course. I'll do whatever is necessary," Daniel said as the police led Emily to a safe area. He felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The situation had been intense and dangerous, but he knew he had done the right thing. Watching Emily disappear with the police, he realized there was still more to be done to ensure her safety and justice. The confrontation had been the most intense moment of his career, but also the most rewarding. Just as he was about to leave the security area, one of the officers called him. "Sir, can you please come with us? We need a bit more information," the officer said politely but firmly. Daniel agreed and was taken into a room where Emily was sitting with a social worker. The girl looked more relaxed but still showed signs of fatigue and fear. The social worker motioned for Daniel to sit down. "Emily has told us part of what happened, but we'd like to hear your version as well," the social worker said. Daniel nodded and began to recount the events of the flight, from the moment he noticed Emily's strange behavior to the confrontation with her father. He explained how the girl signaled for help and how he and the crew devised a plan to ensure her safety. As he spoke, Emily held the social worker's hand for comfort. The officer took detailed notes, and the social worker occasionally interrupted with more specific questions. "Did you notice any other suspicious or dangerous behavior from the father during the flight?" the social worker asked. Daniel thought for a moment. He seemed completely disinterested in his daughter, focused only on his phone. But the look he gave her when he realized we were interacting, it was scary. He seemed more irritated than concerned. The officer finished his notes and thanked Daniel for his cooperation. As he stood to leave, Emily called to him in a soft voice. Daniel, thank you, she said, her eyes filled with gratitude. Daniel smiled at her, feeling a wave of emotion. You were very brave, Emily. Everything will be okay now. As he left the room, Daniel felt the weight of the situation begin to lift. But just as he thought everything was under control, an alarm blared through the terminal. A commotion erupted with people running and shouting. What's happening? He asked one of the guards. There was an escape attempt. Emily's father tried to escape custody, the guard replied, clearly agitated. Daniel's heart raced. He ran back to the room where Emily was. He saw the girl was safe with the social worker and 2 officers, but her father was nowhere in sight. We need to reinforce security here. He can't get near her again, Daniel said, trying to stay calm. The terminal was in chaos, but the police quickly organized a search. After tense moments and a frantic hunt, they finally located Emily's father hiding in a restricted area. He was restrained again, this time with reinforced security. With Emily's father finally detained and taken away, Daniel felt a wave of relief. He returned to the room where Emily was now accompanied by a group of professionals, including social workers and child psychologists. Emily, you're safe now, said one of the social workers with a warm smile. We'll take care of you and make sure everything is all right. Emily looked at Daniel, still holding his hand. There was a silent connection between them, a mutual understanding of what they had gone through together. Daniel, thank you for everything, she said, her voice soft but full of sincerity. Daniel smiled, crouching down to her level. You were very brave, Emily. Always remember that. As Emily was led away, Daniel felt satisfaction but also exhaustion. He knew he had done everything in his power to protect that girl. As he watched the team take Emily, one of the officers approached him. You did a great job today, Daniel. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't noticed the signs, said the officer. Just did what anyone would do, Daniel replied modestly. Later in the terminal, Daniel saw a woman approaching quickly, her eyes filled with worry and tears. It was Emily's mother. When she saw her daughter, she ran to hug her, holding her tightly. Emily, my God, are you okay? She said, her voice choked with emotion. Emily clung to her mother, crying but this time with tears of relief and joy. I'm okay, Mom. Daniel helped me. The mother looked at Daniel with infinite gratitude. Thank you. You saved my daughter, she said emotionally. Daniel nodded, feeling touched by the moment. She's a very special girl. I'm glad I could help. As the mother and daughter reunited, Daniel felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He knew Emily was in good hands and that the situation, despite how difficult it had been, was finally resolved. Walking towards the terminal exit, he felt the day's weight begin to dissipate. The night sky was clear, and he took a deep breath, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. Despite the challenges and dangers, the courage and determination of a little girl, combined with the quick actions of a flight attendant, had changed the course of her life. As he left the airport, Daniel knew that this experience would stay with him forever, a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, it's possible to make a difference and bring safety and hope to those who need it most.
Life is unpredictable, often changing directions when you least expect it. This is the story of how I met Aiden. My name is Isabel. At 30, I was a fitness trainer at a neighborhood gym, leading a life as organized and regimented as my workout plans. That routine was upended the day Aiden walked through the gym doors, looking for a casual workout, but ultimately altering the trajectory of my life. Hi, I'm Aiden. He introduced himself with a dazzling smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. I hear this is the place to get fit. Could you show me around? I gave him a skeptical look. He didn't seem the typical gym enthusiast. He appeared more accustomed to winning people over with his charm. Okay, Aiden, follow me, and you'll be in shape in no time. But just so you know, I don't take it easy on anyone. Aiden's laugh was full of mischief. I wouldn't want it any other way. Lead the way, Isabel. Training Aiden was like trying to rein in a spirited horse. He was bursting with energy and possessed a stubbornness that matched his vigor. Yet, underneath his playful banter and relentless jokes, I sensed a deep respect and an undeniable connection between us. Our days at the gym quickly became the highlight of my week. It was no longer just about fitness. It was about the laughter, the stories we shared, and the camaraderie that grew with every session. One evening, as we were finishing up, Aiden's usual jovial expression turned solemn. Isabel, there's something I need to tell you. I'm here not just for the workouts. I'm here for you. You have a strength and a fire in you that I've never seen in anyone else, and I find myself drawn to you. I was stunned. Aiden, the eternal joker, was now standing before me, vulnerable and sincere. Aiden, I don't know what to say. You're not what I expected, but I can't deny there's something real here. That moment marked the beginning of a whirlwind romance. It was intense and passionate, sweeping us up like a storm. Before I knew it, I was exchanging wedding vows with the man who had walked into my gym and turned my world on its head. However, our fairy tale faced challenges soon after. Isabel, we need to move into my mother's house. I have strong family ties, and it's crucial for me to be there for them, Aiden revealed soon after our wedding. My heart sank. Daniela, his mother, was known for her sharp tongue and critical eye, a stark contrast to Aiden's warmth. And then there was Lucy, his sister, who mirrored her mother's arrogance and disdain. Aiden, are you sure about this? Your relationship with your mother and Lucy is already strained. Is this the best move for us? I asked, trying to mask my concern. Aiden took my hands, his eyes earnest. Isabel, I know it's not ideal, but family means everything to me. We'll make it work, I promise. It's us and our little family against the world. Moving into Aiden's family home felt like entering a war zone. Daniela's house was her fortress, governed by her rules. Lucy was her shadow, amplifying her mother's critical nature. Each morning, Daniela's greeting dripped with an insincerity that was hard to miss. Despite the tension, Aiden's promise echoed in my mind. We were determined to make it work, believing in the strength of our bond to overcome the familial storms. As challenging as life became, it was a testament to the unpredictable paths love can take us on, and the resilience it demands from us. Life at Daniela's house was demanding, a never-ending cycle of household duties where every day felt like a repeat of the one before. Isabel, don't forget the dishes need washing, and the living room needs dusting. We run a tight ship here, Daniela would remind me sharply. I nodded, swallowing the comeback that almost slipped out. Of course, Daniela. I want everything to be perfect. Lucy, ever the spectator from her spot at the kitchen table, would eye me critically. Yeah, Isabel, try to keep up. We don't need any dead weight around here. The days were relentless, filled with cleaning and cooking, as I tried to navigate life in a home that felt more like a minefield than a haven. Aiden, caught up in his own world with the restaurant, was like a shadow in his own family's house. But then life threw me another challenge. I was pregnant. What should have been a joyous announcement felt like just another complication in already turbulent waters. Pregnant, huh? Daniela's voice was flat, her eyes unyielding. Well, don't expect any special treatment. This house doesn't run itself, you know. I stood my ground, my hand instinctively resting on my belly. I don't expect special treatment, Daniela. But I do expect some understanding. I'm carrying your grandchild. That quieted her, if only for a moment. But the respite was short-lived. The chores piled up, the glare sharpened, and the house felt increasingly claustrophobic with each passing day. Lucy watched me struggle, a smug smirk never far from her face. You're slowing down, Isabel. I can't handle a bit of housework. What kind of mother are you going to be? I wanted to shout, to fight back, but I restrained myself for Aiden, for the tiny heartbeat growing stronger inside me. The tension became a constant companion, an unwelcome guest at every meal, every moment. Aiden tried to mediate in his way, but between his family and the restaurant, he was pulled in 1,000 directions. One night, weighed down by the day's pressures, I pleaded with him. Aiden, talk to them, please. Your mother, Lucy. They treat me like I'm nothing, like I don't belong. Aiden sighed a weary sound. Isabel, they're just set in their ways. It's how they've always been. Just give it time. It'll get better. But it didn't get better. It got harder. The house became more suffocating, Daniela and Lucy more relentless, and I was just trying to stay afloat, to protect the tiny life depending on me. As I lay in bed each night, the moon casting shadows across the room, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let their words, their disdain defined me. I was stronger than they knew, and one day they would see it. Becoming a mother was supposed to be the most beautiful chapter of my life, but in Daniela's house, it felt more like a trial by fire. Roman was my ray of sunshine amidst the storm, my little bundle of joy. Yet every cry, every smile, was overshadowed by Daniela and Lucy's relentless pressure and criticism. "Really, Isabel? Can't you keep that child quiet?" Daniela would snap sharply whenever Roman whimpered. Holding Roman close, I whispered words of comfort, shielding him from the harshness of his grandmother's words. "He's just a baby, Daniela. Babies cry, that's how they communicate." Lucy would roll her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. But I knew, no matter what, I would shield Roman from their harshness, nurturing him with the love and warmth he deserved, standing strong against the storm. "You're not approaching this correctly, Isabel. Maybe if you focus more on him instead of wallowing in self-pity, he'd be less noisy." Their words cut deep, each a stark reminder of how alienated I felt in this household, among these family members. But it wasn't just their harsh words, it was their judgmental stares, analyzing my every action, particularly since I'd gained weight after my pregnancy. They seemed to relish discussing my changed physique, as if my former life as a fitness trainer was a distant memory. "Looks like your gym days are behind you, huh, Isabel?" Daniela would say with a laugh, eyeing my body disdainfully. "You might want to skip dessert if you're hoping to fit into your old jeans again." I'd tighten my jaw and force a smile to mask the pain. "I'm proud of my body, Daniela. It brought Romans into the world. The weight is temporary, but my love for my son is eternal." My resistance seemed futile to them. I remained an outsider, an unwelcome element in their perfect little universe. No matter how much I tried, it was never enough. I'd had enough. Daniela and Lucy's relentless criticism wasn't just wearing me down. It was igniting a resolve within me to reclaim my independence, my physical health, and my dignity. I transformed a corner of my room into a makeshift gym. It was humble, just a mat, some weights, and a resolve as firm as iron. "This is it, Roman," I murmured to my baby boy, balancing him on one hip as I set up my phone to record. "Mommy's turning everything around, starting now." The initial days were grueling. The workouts left me breathless. My muscles ached, but each bead of sweat and every sore muscle was a victory. "You think bouncing back is that simple, Isabel?" Daniela scoffed, watching me struggle through my exercises. "It takes more than a few stretches to mend what's broken." I wiped my forehead and met her gaze determinedly. "Watch me, Daniela. I'm not just repairing what's broken. I'm building something stronger. And I don't need your approval or your cynical remarks." That's when I decided to go public with my journey. I launched a YouTube channel and an Instagram account, documenting every hardship and triumph. It was genuine, it was raw, and it connected with countless others. "Look at this, Roman," I'd exclaim, showing him the screen brimming with supportive comments and likes. "We're not alone. There are so many people cheering for us." Advertisers started noticing, and soon, my little digital space became a thriving source of income. "Can you believe this, Roman?" I'd whisper as I tucked him into bed. "We're making it, really making it." But with every milestone, the tension at home intensified. Daniela and Lucy couldn't stand how I turned their mockery into my shield, their contempt into my motivation. "What's this now, Isabel? Playing the star while we do the real work?" Lucy hissed one day, her eyes filled with spite. I stood firm, Roman cradled in my arms, my spirit unbreakable. "It's called changing the game, Lucy. It's called taking back my power. If you find my situation troubling, that's for you to deal with, not me." The house that once felt suffocating had transformed into mere scenery. My life had expanded and brightened, enriched by the love of my son and the support of a community that recognized the true me. My success on various online platforms was a delightful triumph, yet it introduced new challenges. Aiden was overwhelmed by the sheer size of the audience and the flood of comments. Though he was proud, his ego suffered as he feared how his family would perceive our changing roles. "Isabel, "This is amazing, but you know my mother and Lucy," he said one evening, his eyes filled with a plea for understanding. "Let's keep this between us. I don't want them thinking I'm not the provider." I sighed, feeling the heavy burden of his request. "Aiden, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. It's not just about the money. It's about earning respect and gaining independence." He reached for my hand, understanding. "I know, and I respect that. But let's just keep it our secret for now in this house." Reluctantly, I agreed and began secretly transferring $5,000 a month to Aiden's account, a poignant irony that was not lost on me. Daniela and Lucy remained clueless, continuing to see me as a burden on their beloved son and brother. "You're just a freeloader, Isabel, always taking and never giving," Daniela would snap, her words as sharp as ever. I held back my response. The success I kept hidden served as a silent shield against her jabs. "I contribute in my ways, Daniela. Not that you would ever recognize it." Lucy was no different. "What do you even do all day, Isabel? Sit around while we handle all the real work?" Their ignorance was hard to bear, but I endured it, focusing on Roman, my channels, and my newfound strength. I'd spend days in the park with my son, documenting our life through my camera, moments they refused to acknowledge. "You're wasting your time with those videos," Daniela scoffed, watching me edit. But the growing numbers of subscribers, views, and comments spoke for themselves. They were real, tangible, and they were mine. "Maybe to you, Daniela, but to me and thousands out there, this is far from a waste," I'd respond, my confidence solid. Meanwhile, Aiden's restaurant faced difficulties, adding complexity to our lives. One day, he approached me, his pride barely concealing his desperation. "Isabel, the restaurant is struggling. Could you help? Maybe lend some money to keep it going?" His vulnerability was touching, and it pulled at my heartstrings. "Of course, Aiden. I'll help. But this isn't just a loan. It's an investment in us, in our family." His relief was visible, mixed with unspoken acknowledgement that I was now the lifeline, the quiet savior of our family's facade. As I transferred $12,000 and saw the gratitude and guilt in his eyes, I realized the balance had indeed shifted. Time in that house felt like a ticking time bomb, with each day edging us closer to an inevitable explosion. Lucy's marriage introduced her husband Brooks into our already crowded space, adding to the constant chaos and tension. "You two just take up space," Daniela sneered, her words slicing through the crowded living room. "You're nothing but freeloaders, Isabel. You and that kid." I clenched my teeth, pulling Roman closer. "We're family, Daniela. Or at least, that's what a house like this is supposed to mean." When Lucy revealed her pregnancy, Daniela's demeanor took on an even harsher tone, directly affecting the household dynamics. "This house is getting too crowded, Isabel. You and your son are just in the way," she stated bluntly. The words hurt deeply, but before I could react, Aiden announced unexpectedly during dinner that he needed to leave town for a few weeks due to his restaurant business, avoiding eye contact with me. His departure felt unbearable, leaving me to handle the tense home environment alone. "You're leaving now?" "With everything that's going on," I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. As he left, the absence of his support enveloped the home in a palpable gloom. I strived to keep things normal for our son Roman, engaging in activities outside the oppressive atmosphere at home. However, one day upon returning from kindergarten, the sight that met us stopped me cold. Our belongings, bags, suitcases, Roman's toys, were piled outside the front door, as if they were trash. "Mommy, what's happening?" Roman asked, his voice tinged with fear and confusion. Holding back tears, I confronted the closed door. "Daniela, Lucy, why are our things outside?" My voice trembled with anger and disbelief. The chilling reply came from Daniela through the door. "You heard me, Isabel. The house is too crowded, and you two are just taking up space. It's time for you to leave. Find somewhere else to call home." Lucy's mocking laughter only twisted the knife deeper. As I stood there, the world seemed to collapse around me. How would I explain this to Aiden? What would he say to his son about where his wife and child were? With a heavy heart and a mind reeling from shock and betrayal, I gathered our belongings. Holding Roman's hand, we walked away from what was never truly a home. The pain was acute, the betrayal profound, yet it also marked a clear turning point. This was the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of a new one, ours alone. I rented an apartment, a modest but safe refuge for me and Roman. As I unpacked and settled in, the reality of our escape began to truly register. Though I was alone for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope and a newfound sense of freedom. Making the apartment feel like home was a bittersweet task, but the shadows of Daniela's house no longer loomed over us. As I was arranging our new space, my phone buzzed with a message from Lucy, her words dripping with malice. "You think you know Aiden? Think again, Isabel." Attached was a link, a gateway to truths I had never imagined. Trembling, I clicked on the link. The screen illuminated with images that completely shattered my reality. There was Aiden, clearly not burdened by restaurant troubles. In the embrace of another woman, their closeness was unmistakable, captured vividly in photographs, a stark contradiction to the fabrications he had spun for me. The images were freshly dated, from just yesterday. His so-called business trip and his claims of being overwhelmed by stress were merely parts of a deceitful charade, with me unknowingly funding the facade. I was left feeling numb, the sting of betrayal melding with a chilling determination. For years, I had silently supported him, underpinning a man who led a dual life, while his family treated me with contempt. This week of emotional turmoil culminated in relentless calls from Aiden. His once soothing voice now ignited my disdain. "Isabel, please come back. Mom and Lucy crossed a line. And the restaurant, it's falling apart. I need you, Isabel. The bills are mounting." Previously, such pleas would tug at my heartstrings, but now they only brewed my scorn. "So, you only reach out when you need me to settle your bills and those of your families?" His voice cracked, desperation leaking through. "We're still a family, you, me, Roman. Isn't that worth fighting for?" A scoff escaped me. "A family? Is that what you call this act?" "No, Aiden, we're far from a family. As for your restaurant and your debts, those are your burdens to bear." Silence hung heavy on the line, thick and awkward. I could sense the gravity of his troubles bearing down on him. "But Isabel, the money. Your problem, Aiden. Your restaurant, your money." "I'm done being your lifeline," I interjected firmly, my voice resolute yet strong. "However, we will discuss this tomorrow. I will come to your mother's house." Resolved, I planned to return to that house not as the subdued woman they anticipated, but as the formidable force they had never anticipated. Armed with the truth and a strategy set to upend their world, I stepped into the lion's den. Aiden's face brightened with a mix of hope and surprise, but Daniela and Lucy's expressions were frosty, clearly displeased by my return. "Look who's back," Daniela sneered, her voice laden with scorn. "Missed us, have you?" I met her gaze steadily. "Not at all, Daniela. I'm here for something crucial." I handed Aiden an envelope, his complexion draining as he realized its contents. "Divorce papers." "Our marriage ends here," I declared, the words tasting of freedom. Daniela and Lucy's initial shock quickly shifted to smiles, pleased to be rid of the dead weight. "Oh, Aiden's?" Lucy taunted, her laughter grating on my nerves. Their jubilation was premature. "Don't get too excited," I cut in sharply. "You might want to sit down for this. It's been me, not Aiden, keeping this household afloat." The room plunged into stunned silence as Aiden's gaze flickered between me and his family, the truth now laid bare. "It's true," he whispered, voice barely audible. "The restaurant's been failing. Isabel's been covering everything. She transferred $5,000 to me every month." Daniela and Lucy turned on him, their faces contorted with anger and disbelief. "You lied to us. You let her pay our bills," Daniela shrieked. As they grappled with the reality, Aiden, driven by desperation, announced, "I'm going to file for alimony. I earn less, so it's only fair." His mother and sister applauded this decision, their claps echoing hollowly in the room, oblivious to the seismic shifts unfolding. I couldn't suppress a chuckle at the sheer absurdity of the situation. "You think that's going to work, Aiden? You won't get a dime from me, especially after I discovered your affair." His face went pale. Stammering, he tried to speak, his usual bravado now shattered. I glanced at Lucy sharply. "Your sister graciously provided all the evidence I needed." The ensuing argument was explosive. The house echoed with the sound of accusations and betrayals being thrown openly. Aiden and Lucy were at each other's throats, gesturing wildly as they yelled. Amid the turmoil, I stayed serene, my resolve unshaken. "I'm reclaiming what's mine," I announced, my voice slicing through the uproar. "Every appliance, every piece of furniture I paid for, it's all coming with me. You're left with whatever you've truly earned, which amounts to nothing." And that's precisely what I did. I removed every item I had financed from the house, stripping it bare, leaving them to confront the aftermath of their deceit. Daniela and Lucy's pleas for mercy and forgiveness fell on deaf ears. I blocked their numbers, cutting off all remaining ties to a life filled with deception and disrespect. The fallout was rapid. Aiden's restaurant faltered and fell under the crushing debt. They lost the house, and Lucy's husband departed, leaving behind the ruins of their family. They were left with nothing but each other and their errors, crammed into a tiny, rented apartment. As for me, Roman and I thrived in our fresh start. Our days were imbued with love, laughter, and the tranquility we had so ardently fought for. The past became a faint memory, now overshadowed by the bright future we were actively building together. We were not merely survivors, we were victors, embarking on a new chapter in our lives that was just beginning. From as far back as I can remember, my life has been intertwined with fish and farming. My father harbored grand ambitions to transform our property into the nation's leading trout hatchery, and remarkably, he achieved it. I was always by his side, wading knee-deep in pond water, mastering every aspect of the trade. It was more than just work. It was our family's calling, a legacy that shaped my childhood. I spent my days shadowing the fish beneath the surface, learning the business nuances long before I understood what business really meant. "Mia," my dad would call out, beckoning me to learn how to correctly sort the trout, an intricate skill essential for determining their paths on our farm. One tranquil evening, under a sky brushed with strokes of orange and purple, my father shared a poignant moment with me. His expression was solemn, his tone grave as he prepared to share some wisdom. "Look, kiddo," he began, "I won't be here forever. All of this," he gestured broadly at the land and waters around us, "will be yours someday. You need to be ready to nurture it, grow it, and elevate it to new heights." I remember brushing off his seriousness with a laugh, jokingly asserting that he would outlast us all, unwilling to face the reality of his mortality. Yet, his eyes softened with a mix of affection and earnestness as he made me promise to sustain and enhance our farm. Tragically, when I turned 26, cancer claimed my father's life. It struck our family hard, devastating my mother to the point of illness. Suddenly, I found myself at the helm of our operations, tasked with fulfilling my father's expansive dreams, which included diversifying into ornamental fish and even introducing livestock, given the expanse of our land. However, with my mother's health declining and the farm demanding constant attention, my personal aspirations had to be momentarily shelved. I employed a few extra hands to manage the more strenuous tasks, as running a fish farm is no small feat. It involves endless cycles of feeding, cleaning, and maintenance. But the responsibility was immense, and often, late at night, I would sit by the pond, lost in thought about my father. He had envisioned this life for me, and despite the challenges of facing it alone, I could almost hear him encouraging me, "You got this, girl." Those moments of solitude and reflection were brief, though, as there was always more to be done. Overseeing workers, purchasing fish food, cleaning tanks, and caring for my ailing mother. Despite the hardships, I remained resolute. My father had built something extraordinary, and I was determined not to let it falter on my watch. "We're doing this, Dad," I'd whisper into the night, committing myself to uphold his legacy. Life on the farm meant foregoing the glamour for practicality, preferring the fresh scent of dawn and muddy boots over any fancy attire. Yet, when an invitation to a charity dinner arrived, something within me stirred. Perhaps it was the relentless days surrounded by fish and feed, or maybe it was my mother's gentle nudge from her sickbed, her way of suggesting I add a little sparkle to my life. So, I traded my overalls for the only decent dress I owned, stepping into a world utterly alien from mine. The evening was a blur of new faces and polite conversations, a dazzling contrast to my daily life. Surrounded by superficial smiles and polite nods, I felt lost in the crowd until Lawrence and Lucas stumbled into my life like a breath of fresh air in a stifling room. Their laughter was easy and their presence genuine, a stark contrast to the pretentious atmosphere I had been navigating. Lawrence, with his infectious grin, approached me near the buffet and joked, "Never thought I'd meet a real farmer here." His comments sparked a connection, and I found myself joking about reevaluating my life choices. Lucas, always with his camera in hand, captured moments as if they were treasures. Their straightforward and unrefined demeanor made me feel at ease, a rarity in such gatherings. When Lawrence inquired about the farm with genuine interest, his humor about fish farming being fishy brought a genuine laugh from me, something I hadn't experienced in months. As the evening progressed, Lawrence's continued interest in my work and dreams for the farm was a refreshing change from the usual shallow conversations about online adventures. His admiration for my work, especially when I mentioned the farm's turnover in a rare moment of pride, felt like a validation of all my efforts. When he expressed interest in visiting the farm, I was surprised by my eagerness to show him my world. Walking through the hatcheries, their laughter, and Lawrence's excitement over every little detail of fish breeding was like a seal of approval for my life's work. As we watched the sunset over the pond, Lawrence's touch and warm voice sparked something new in me, something thrilling. Despite my mother's warnings that men like him might not adapt well to our straightforward, rural life, I wanted to believe that Lawrence was different. He seemed genuinely interested in embracing farm life and being with me. I defended him passionately to my mother, fueled by a hope I hadn't felt since my father passed. Our wedding was a simple yet profound celebration of love, set against the backdrop of our farm. Lucas documented every moment, capturing the joy of our union. However, as time passed, the initial magic of Lawrence's enthusiasm seemed to wear off. His interest in capturing every aspect of farm life began to feel more like a performance for the camera than genuine participation. The reality of our situation hit me hard one day when I found him lounging under an old oak, completely disengaged from the farm activities. This stark contrast between his initial fascination and the current disinterest made me wonder about the durability of our shared dreams and whether my mother's cautious words held more truth than I had wanted to admit. I could barely contain my disappointment, having hoped for your help today. These ponds won't clean themselves, after all. He glanced up, a leisurely smile unfurling across his features. "I was about to, just taking a quick break to update my followers," he said. It was the usual excuse. His assistance was minimal and fleeting, only engaging when it benefited his online image. Whenever he did help, it was lackluster, often causing more issues than it resolved. I recall the first lesson I gave him on feeding our trout. "You must be accurate with this. Overfeeding is wasteful, and underfeeding stunts their growth," I instructed, handing him the measuring scoop. He accepted it, nodding absent-mindedly. "Sure, but think about how cool a feeding frenzy video would look." "Imagine the views," he exclaimed. The gravity of our work, maintaining the delicate balance of life here, was merely fodder for his social media. Yet, love sometimes masks glaring warnings as trivial flaws. My mother, perceptive even in her illness, saw his true nature immediately. One night, as I sat beside her, she clasped my hand with surprising strength. "That boy isn't here for you or the farm," she observed. I wanted to refute her words, to defend him, but I remained silent, the truth too painful to admit. Following another disappointing day of broken promises and him glued to his phone, my patience wore thin. "Lawrence, I really need your genuine assistance. Not just for appearances," I implored, frustration evident in my tone as I wiped away sweat. The farm demanded real effort, not just superficial involvement. He paused, his expression briefly sincere. "I know I've been distant with the farm work," he admitted. Then, glancing at his brother by the barn, he offered, "What if I manage the finances instead?" His brother gave a subtle nod, and a silent exchange passed between them, leaving me out. Despite my reservations, the idea of lightening my load was appealing. "Are you sure you can handle that?" I asked, doubtful. Managing our finances was crucial, not a task for the careless. "Absolutely, trust me," Lawrence asserted, though his assurance didn't quite reach his eyes. His brother interjected, "Lawrence is good with numbers. You won't regret it." Perhaps it was my weariness or the remnants of faith in the man I married, but I conceded. "Okay, you're in charge of the finances, but understand, we can't afford any mistakes," I said firmly. He nodded, too eagerly. "You've got it. I'll handle everything. You won't have to worry." 7 months into our marriage, Lawrence faced challenges as his vlogging popularity waned. As the money dwindled, one evening he abruptly announced, "Babe, I need to go to the city to sort some things out with my brother. The channel's not doing well." He didn't even glance up from his phone. I was in the middle of chopping vegetables for dinner, and I stopped, knife hovering in the air. "And what about the farm? What about us?" My voice was steady, but inside, a tempest was brewing. He was packing his camera equipment with more diligence than he had ever shown our shared life. "It's just for a bit. You can manage things here, right?" I nodded, lips pressed tightly together. I knew I could handle the farm, I always had. But as he walked out the door, a chill of loneliness wrapped around me, stark and severe. Not 3 weeks later, my mother's health plummeted. She had been my pillar, and now she was fading fast. After she passed away, I was shattered. I dialed Lawrence, seeking even the smallest comfort. "Lawrence, Mom's gone. I need you," I sobbed into the phone. There was a brief silence before he replied, "Babe, I'm swamped. The city's alive, and we're onto something big. I can't just leave." His words struck me harshly, too preoccupied to attend to his own wife's sorrow. I ended the call, the phone slipping from my numb hand. For long months later, Lawrence finally returned. He strutted onto the farm as if his absence had been nothing, as if he hadn't left me alone when I needed him the most. "Look at this place. But hey, I've got news," he beamed as I fed the fish, hands grimy. "News?" I repeated, dread settling in. "Yeah, found a new feed supplier. It's cheaper and the fish grow faster. We're going to save a lot," he explained, his eyes brightening with what seemed like a spark of responsibility. I stood up, wiping my hands on my apron. "We don't use chemicals, Lawrence. You know that. Our reputation hinges on natural, quality growth." He dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand, his excitement undiminished. "It's just business, babe. We need to think about profits. Plus, I have even bigger plans." "Bigger plans?" I asked, tension rising. He nodded, eager. "A massive event right here. Celebrities, influencers, the works. It'll put us on the map." I stared at him, a mix of disbelief and anger churning inside. "An event? With all these people and fireworks? Do you even understand what that could do to the fish, to the farm?" His patience waned, his excitement souring into frustration. "It's decided, all right? It's going to be epic." As the preparations unfolded, trucks invaded, carrying equipment alien to the pastoral life. Tents sprouted like unwelcome fungi, transforming the landscape into something unrecognizable. On the day of the event, the farm no longer felt like a sanctuary, but an occupied land, thronged by strangers indifferent to the delicate balance we nurtured. Lawrence mingled like a perfect host, while I stood aside, witnessing the disruption. The fish ponds, though off-limits, still drew curious guests, their intrigue ignorant of the harm they could cause. As dusk fell, the concert kicked off. Music throbbed through the evening air, an invasive sound against the tranquil backdrop. From a distance, I watched, my heart heavy with each note. Then, the fireworks erupted, bright, loud, and terrifying. Beneath the surface, I could only imagine the terror inflicted on our fish, their home now a chaotic clash of light and noise. When the fireworks dwindled to a smoky silence, it left a palpable gloom over the farm. I began cleaning up the mess left by the guests, the weight of the day's events pressing coldly against my resolve. When I overheard Lawrence and his brother, they were hidden in the shadows, their voices low but brimming with excitement. That was epic, man. Did you see the views rolling in? Our channel's going to explode after this. Lawrence's voice held a note of triumph that sent shivers down my spine. His brother's laugh was oily and disdainful. Yeah, those clowns eat it right up. Fools, all of them, easy as pie. I edged closer, shrouded by the dark, my heart thumping wildly. This was the man I had married, speaking with such cold, calculated disregard for his followers. Their talk then shifted in a chilling direction. So, about the farm, his brother murmured, his tone barely a whisper. You think she'll fall for it? Lawrence's reply was a scoff, dripping with scorn. Of course she will. She's clueless, a complete fool. Just a bit of charm and she'll sign whatever I put in front of her. Might not even have to forge anything. Their quiet, conspiratorial laughter broke something inside me. The warnings from my mother, the doubts I had suppressed, they all crashed over me in that instant. The next evening at dinner, I faced them, Lawrence with his deceivingly warm smile and his brother, the quiet conspirator. They exchanged fleeting glances, underestimating my awareness. Dinner's great, isn't it? Hope the farm's growing on you, Lawrence, I said, my voice a calm veneer over my seething thoughts. Oh, it is. It's fantastic here, Mia. We're going to do great things, he replied, reaching for my hand. His touch, once comforting, now repulsed me like a serpent's coil. His brother chimed in, yeah, we've got big plans. This place has so much potential. I gently withdrew my hand, still smiling. I'm glad to hear it. I've got some plans of my own, for the farm. They paused, unease flickering across their faces. Oh, like what? Lawrence asked, his tone edged with caution. Just some ideas I've been toying with. You'll see, I replied, keeping my tone light and airy as if I hadn't just uncovered their betrayal. After the chaos of the event settled, I knew drastic steps were needed. My first stop was the family lawyer, Mr. Bobby, in his office which smelled of leather and old books, a comfort amid the turmoil. Mr. Bobby, I need to lock down the farm's finances. Lawrence can't have access anymore, I stated plainly. He looked up, surprise etching his features before nodding. That's serious, Mia? All right, let's get the paperwork started. Then I did something I never imagined I would. I hired a private investigator named Ethan, known for his thoroughness. A week later, he laid out the grim reality. Lawrence and his brother had been siphoning money from the farm, funding their schemes, and lining their pockets. My heart sank, fury and self-reproach swirling within me. Armed with the evidence, I marched to the police station. Handing over the documents, I felt a mix of relief and dread. They've been stealing from the farm, I told the officer, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. When the police picked up Lawrence and his brother, Lawrence dared to call me. Mia, you gotta bail us out, he pleaded. The nerve of his request only fueled my resolve. This was the end of overlooking his misdeeds, the end of his deception. After a misunderstanding, he called me, his voice desperate on the phone. I couldn't help but laugh at his use of the word misunderstanding. It was clear what had happened. Enjoy your stay, I replied and ended the call with a definitive click. A sense of relief washed over me, yet I knew there was still much to address. Determined to expose the whole debacle, I decided to turn the situation into a public spectacle. If Lawrence adored the limelight so much, he was about to be thrust into it, though not in the manner he'd prefer. I reached out to a local TV station and several of Lawrence's rival bloggers. Come to the farm and see the chaos his grand plans caused, I urged them. They arrived, cameras ready, capturing the devastating aftermath. Dead fish floated in the ponds, casualties of the raucous explosions. The air was heavy with a foul stench, a tangible reminder of the havoc wreaked. Standing before the cameras, I narrated our ordeal. This is the consequence when fame and greed overshadow responsibility. This farm is our livelihood, and their reckless pursuit for views almost obliterated it. The public outcry was swift and fierce. The internet was abuzz with the real story, showing the dead fish and the damage inflicted on the farm. Cartoonists depicted the brothers as symbols of greed and foolishness. Lawrence's channel's popularity plummeted, losing followers rapidly. Advertisers withdrew, unwilling to associate with him or his brother. But my actions didn't stop there. Driven by a blend of anger and a desire for justice, I initiated a divorce and filed a lawsuit against them, demanding compensation for every dollar they cost me and the farm, amounting to $2.8 million. It felt like a declaration of war, but for the first time in months, I was on the offensive. Amidst this, I launched my own YouTube channel. It wasn't about revenge. It was about taking back my narrative and honoring my family's legacy. To my surprise, or perhaps not, people rallied behind me. Subscribers flocked to the channel, eager to witness the farm's recovery unfold. Lawrence attempted to reconcile, bombarding me with calls, texts, and feeble apologies. "Let's talk. We can resolve this," he'd plead. But I had moved on, focusing on rebuilding the farm and securing our future. The court's ruling was the final blow to their schemes, awarding me $2.1 million in damages. Watching Lawrence and his brother struggle to comply with the payments and face charges for attempted fraud was more gratifying than I cared to admit. They lost it all: their followers, their credibility, and any semblance of respect. As dawn broke, casting a golden glow over the revitalized farm, I stood by the fence, a sense of peace enveloping me for the first time in a long while. Wayne, my longest-serving employee, approached with 2 cups of coffee. Handing me one, he remarked, "Morning, Mia. Looks like it's going to be a good day." Sipping the bitter coffee grounded me. "It does. We've come a long way, haven't we?" I replied. He leaned on the fence, nodding in agreement. "We sure have. Never thought I'd see this place so lively again." Glancing at the ornamental fish tanks, now shimmering with vibrant colors, a stark contrast to our old trout ponds, I couldn't help but smile. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" I said, reflecting on the new chapter unfolding before us. Wayne and I stood by the shimmering fish tanks, admiring the vibrant scene. "And profitable too, who would have thought?" he said with a chuckle. "You were the visionary, always knew it. You saw beyond just trout and feed," Wayne continued, his voice echoing a blend of admiration and surprise. As we discussed the day's tasks, my phone vibrated with an incoming email. It was a request from a local school hoping to organize a field trip to our farm. "Looks like we're becoming a staple in the community," I remarked, showing Wayne the email. "That's fantastic. Education is as vital as business. These kids have a lot to learn from what you've built here," he replied, a hint of pride lacing his voice. I couldn't help but smile, feeling the weight of our achievements. Our farm was no longer just about recuperation. It was a beacon of resilience, education, and progress. The future seemed as bright as the morning sun that stretched across our fields. We had plans to expand, with ideas for sustainability projects and community outreach pulsing at the heart of our agenda. The betrayal that once loomed large now paved the way for this new chapter, one brimming with hope, growth, and new horizons. Wayne's voice brought me back to the moment. "Ready to get started?" "Those fish aren't going to feed themselves," he joked. Laughing along, I nodded in agreement. "Let's do it. There's no place I'd rather be." As we made our way into the heart of the lively farm, I felt a wave of readiness wash over me. I was equipped with the same resolve and vigor that had helped me overcome the hardest moments in my life. I was ready to face any obstacles that might arise. The future was yet to be decided, and for the first time in many years, I was truly thrilled about the possibilities that awaited us on this new path.
The crystal champagne flute trembles in my hand as I watch my stepfather Richard take the stage. The retirement gala sparkles around us, a testament to 30 years of building Silverstone media from nothing. My heart pounds with anticipation. After a decade of 70-hour weeks and sacrificed relationships, tonight everything changes. I'm Autumn, and I've spent my entire adult life preparing for this moment. Friends, colleagues, family, Richard begins, his voice carrying across the grand ballroom. Tonight marks not just an ending, but a beginning. The crowd of 300 falls silent. I straighten my spine, smoothing down my midnight blue dress. Next to me, my half-brother Tyler fidgets with his bow tie, his usual cocky smirk replaced by an unusual intensity. Silverstone Media has been my life's work, Richard continues. But every empire needs new blood, fresh vision. He pauses, his eyes scanning the crowd. That's why I'm proud to announce that, effective immediately, my son Tyler will be taking over as Chief Executive Officer. The champagne flute slips from my numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Heads turn. Whispers ripple through the crowd. My mother Lily won't meet my eyes. Tyler brings exactly what this company needs to face the challenges ahead. Richard's words hammer nails into my coffin of dreams. Youth, innovation, and most importantly, the right instincts for leadership. Applause erupts. Tyler bounds onto stage, all practiced charm and perfect teeth. I remain rooted in place, shards of crystal crunching under my heels. Speech, someone calls out. Tyler grabs the microphone, basking in the spotlight that should have been mine. I promise to make Silverstone Media stronger than ever, he declares, to honor my father's legacy while blazing new trails. My colleague Derek appears at my elbow. This can't be happening, he mutters. Everyone knows you're the one who... Not now, I cut him off, plastering on a smile as cameras flash. Inside, acid burns through my chest. Later, during the endless, congratulatory mingling, I corner Richard near the bar. Why? The single word carries a decade of betrayal. He sighs, swirling his scotch. Business isn't just about hard work, Autumn. It's about instinct, natural leadership. Tyler has that spark. Tyler has barely worked a full week in his life. He doesn't know the first thing about running this company. He'll learn, and you'll help him, won't you? Richard's tone carries steel beneath the request. For the good of the family, I want to scream, to expose every time Tyler's natural leadership meant pawning his work off on others. Instead, I nod stiffly. Of course. Across the room, I spot my grandmother Evelyn holding court with board members, probably already spinning this disaster into dynasty-building brilliance. My mother hovers nearby, champagne glass perpetually full. There's my favorite sister. Tyler's arm lands heavy across my shoulders. He reeks of expensive cologne and victory. Ready to show me the ropes? I extract myself from his embrace. Congratulations, Tyler. You must be so proud. Hey, no hard feelings, right? Dad knows what he's doing, and you're still part of the team. Part of the team. After 10 years of building client relationships, streamlining operations, and practically running things while Richard focused on the big picture. Now I get to teach my frat boy brother how to do my job. Of course, I say smoothly. No hard feelings at all. I excuse myself to the powder room, locking the door behind me. In the mirror, my reflection stares back. Composed, professional, the perfect corporate soldier. But something dark flickers behind my eyes. They want me to help Tyler. Fine, I'll help him straight into the ground. I'll watch everything Richard built crumble under his golden boy's incompetent hands. And when it's all ashes, they'll finally understand what they threw away. I reapply my lipstick, adjust my smile, and return to the party. After all, I have a lot to teach my dear brother about running a company. Starting with exactly how much he doesn't know. The morning after the gala, I find my mother in her garden, methodically deadheading roses like nothing's changed. Her perfectly manicured nails snip through stems with practiced precision. She doesn't look up when I approach. Did you know? The words taste like battery acid. Snip. Another dead bloom falls. Richard made his decision, Autumn. We need to respect that. That's not what I asked. My hands clench into fists. Did you know he was going to humiliate me in front of everyone? She finally meets my eyes, her expression carefully neutral. Tyler is Richard's son. The company is his legacy. And what am I? The backup plan. The workhorse who gets discarded when it's convenient. Don't be dramatic. She moves to another rosebush. You still have your position. Nothing's really changed. A bitter laugh escapes me. Nothing's changed. He gave my promotion to Tyler, who can barely handle his own expense reports without help. Your brother has potential. He just needs guidance. She pauses, her voice softening. This could be good for both of you, working together, supporting each other. Supporting each other. My voice rises. Where was his support when I was working 60-hour weeks? When I missed Christmas because of the Miller account? When... Autumn... My grandmother Evelyn's sharp voice cuts through my tirade. She stands in the garden doorway, elegant as ever in her tailored pantsuit. That's quite enough. Your mother doesn't need this hysteria. Of course not. I turn to face her. Heaven forbid anyone disturb the family peace by pointing out inconvenient truths. The truth, Evelyn says coldly, is that Richard built this company from nothing. He has every right to choose its future leadership. The truth is that Tyler's going to run it into the ground, and you're all too blinded by tradition to see it. Perhaps, she replies, if you'd spent more time cultivating relationships instead of spreadsheets, things might be different. The barb hits its mark. I remember all the family dinners I missed, the social events I skipped, always putting the company first, thinking it would prove my worth. You mean if I'd played politics better? I ask quietly. Smiled more? Been more like Tyler? Your brother understands people, my mother interjects. He has natural charisma. He has natural charm and zero work ethic, I snap. But sure, let's pretend that's leadership. Evelyn's eyes narrow. Mind your tone, young lady. This attitude isn't helping anyone. No? I laugh. Well, neither is pretending everything's fine while Tyler destroys what I've spent 10 years building. What Richard spent 30 years building, Evelyn corrects sharply. Don't overstate your importance. The words slice deep. I see my mother flinch, but she says nothing. Always the peacekeeper, never taking sides. My phone buzzes, a message from Derek about an emergency client meeting Tyler's already missed. Of course. You know what? I straighten my spine. You're right. I should focus on what's important, like making sure your precious golden boy doesn't bankrupt us in his first week. Autumn, please. My mother reaches for my arm. Can't we just what, Mum? Pretend everything's fine? Play happy families while watching Tyler destroy everything? I pull away. Sorry, but I learned from the best about putting the company first. Evelyn's voice follows me as I stride away. Richard was right about your temperament. This is exactly why. I don't hear the rest. Don't need to. Their expectations and disappointments have always spoken louder than words. Back in my car, I grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turn white. My phone buzzes again. 3 missed calls from Tyler, probably needing me to bail him out of whatever mess he's already created. Fine. They want me to support Tyler. I'll support him right off a cliff. Let them see exactly what happens when they bet everything on the wrong horse. I start the engine, a plan already forming. Richard taught me everything about building a company. Now I'll use those lessons to tear it all down. My mother's roses disappear in the rearview mirror, blood-red petals scattered across perfectly manicured grass. Sometimes you have to prune deep to fix what's broken, and I'm done playing in someone else's garden. The quarterly reports spread across my desk tell a story that makes my blood run cold. Not because of what they show, but because of what they hide. 3 months of subtle irregularities, carefully masked transfers, and project reassignments that all point to one truth. Richard has been systematically setting Tyler up to fail. These numbers don't add up. Derek leans over my shoulder, frowning at the screen. The Morrison account shows double the projected expenses, but half the staff allocation. I pull up another document. Look at this. Every major account Tyler's supposedly managing was restructured before the handover. Richard stripped out the support staff, removed the safety nets. While making it look like business as usual, Derek whistles low. That's cold, even for Richard. He's creating a perfect storm. My fingers trace the patterns of destruction hidden in plain sight. Tyler won't see it coming until it's too late. A knock interrupts us. Maya stands in the doorway, perfectly composed as always. Tyler's looking for you. The Jensen presentation starts in 20 minutes. The presentation he was supposed to prepare last week? I close the files quickly. The same. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. He mentioned something about needing your expert touch on the numbers. Of course he does. I grab my laptop, mind racing. Derek, can you... Already on it. He taps his tablet meaningfully. I'll dig deeper into those discrepancies. The executive conference room buzzes with tension when I arrive. Tyler paces by the window, his usual swagger replaced by barely concealed panic. There you are. He grabs my arm. Look, I know this is last minute, but I really need you to. Take over the presentation. I finish flatly. Just help me look good. His smile wavers. Dad's calling in, and after last week's mishap with the Miller contract. You mean when you forgot to review the terms and nearly cost us the account? Details. He waves dismissively. Come on, sis, we're family. Family. The word tastes bitter now. I think of the doctored reports, of Richard's elaborate trap, of Tyler walking blindly into it. Fine. I pull up the presentation I knew I'd end up giving. But we do this my way. The meeting starts rough and gets worse. Tyler fumbles basic questions, contradicts himself, and keeps looking to me with increasingly desperate eyes. I feed him answers, watch him stumble through them, and feel something shift inside me. Richard's face on the video call remains impassive, but I see the calculation behind his eyes. He's watching his plan unfold exactly as designed. Perhaps, Richard interrupts Tyler's latest rambling response. Autumn could clarify the projection models. And there it is, the perfect moment to expose everything. The manipulation, the setup, the inevitable crash he's orchestrating. I could save Tyler from what's coming, or... Actually, I smile, I think Tyler should walk us through his vision for the account's future development. Tyler freezes. Richard's eyebrows lift slightly. In the silence that follows, I see the moment Tyler realizes he's completely out of his depth. The meeting ends in polite disaster. As executives file out, Maya lingers, her expression thoughtful. Interesting strategy, she murmurs, letting him sink rather than saving him. Sometimes people need to learn their own lessons. Her laugh is soft. Is that what we're calling it? Back in my office, Derek's waiting with more findings. It's worse than we thought. Richard's been systematically... I know. I cut him off, staring at the city beyond my window. He's orchestrating Tyler's failure to prove a point. So, what are you going to do? Tell Tyler? I think of my brother's desperate eyes in that meeting, of Richard's calculated manipulation, of my mother's roses and grandmother's dismissal. No. I turn back to my desk, pulling up the files that will seal Tyler's fate. I'm going to help them both get exactly what they want. Autumn, Derek's voice carries a warning. Richard wants to teach Tyler a lesson about leadership. I start typing. Fine, let's give them both an education they'll never forget. The quarterly reports glow on my screen, their hidden messages now clear as day. Richard thinks he's the only one who can play this game. He's about to learn otherwise. Sometimes the best revenge isn't stopping someone's plans. It's helping them succeed in all the wrong ways. Sleep hasn't come easily since I discovered Richard's manipulation. Tonight, I stand at my apartment window, watching city lights blur through a glass of bourbon when my phone vibrates. A message from an unknown number. Check your email. You're not the only one he's playing. The attached files make my hands shake. Employee records, performance reviews, a pattern spanning years before Tyler, before me. Other promising executives, carefully groomed, then systematically destroyed. Couldn't sleep either. Derek's voice comes through when I call. I was about to... Did you send these files? A pause. What files? I forward them while explaining. His sharp intake of breath tells me he's seeing what I saw. Jesus, he mutters. Sarah Chen in 2015. Marcus Rodriguez in 2018. All of them. Set up to fail. My reflection stares back, haunted. It's his game. Build them up, break them down, then sweep in to save the company. And now Tyler's next. Derek's keyboard clicks in the background. But why would he do this to his own son? The bourbon burns going down. Because it's never been about Tyler. It's about control. Always has been. A knock at my door makes me freeze. Through the peephole, Maya stands in the hallway, perfectly composed despite the late hour. We need to talk, she says when I open the door. Her eyes flick to my phone. Alone. I end the call with Derek, but leave the line open, muted. Maya moves through my apartment like she owns it, settling onto my couch with practiced grace. Those files you received? She crosses her legs. They're just the beginning. You sent them. I've been watching Richard's pattern for years. She pulls out a tablet. Waiting for the right moment, the right ally. And you think that's me? Her smile is razor sharp. I think you're smart enough to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about your brother anymore. The tablet shows more documents. Board meeting minutes, private emails, financial transfers. A web of manipulation spanning decades. Richard's retiring, but he's not letting go, Maya continues. Tyler's just his latest puppet. Once he fails, Richard steps in as special advisor to clean up the mess. The board begs him to return, and the cycle continues. My hands clench. Why show me this? Because you're different. You actually understand the business. With the right evidence, the right strategy. She lets the implication hang. You want me to help you expose him. I want us to help each other. She stands, smoothing her skirt. Think about it, but don't take too long. Others are already moving against him. After she leaves, Derek's voice crackles through my phone. You know this is a trap, right? I stare at the documents Maya left behind. The question is, whose trap? Autumn. His tone carries warning. This is bigger than family drama now. People's careers, lives. I know. My voice sounds distant to my own ears. That's why I have to do something. Do what, exactly? The bourbon glass catches moonlight, casting shadows like prison bars across my floor. Beat them at their own game. I spend the rest of the night digging deeper, mapping connections, finding patterns. By dawn, my walls are covered in digital strings of evidence, all pointing to one inescapable truth. I'm not just fighting for my place anymore. I'm fighting for everyone Richard has ever destroyed. My phone buzzes. Tyler, asking for help with another presentation. Below that, a message from my mother about Sunday dinner. A family pretending everything's normal while Rome burns. Maya's right about one thing. This is bigger than Tyler now, but she's wrong if she thinks I'm playing by anyone's rules but my own. I send Derek a message. Get me everything you can on Maya's history with the company. Every project, every connection. Then I call Tyler. Hey, brother. About that presentation, I have some ideas I think Dad will love. Sometimes the only way to dismantle a game is to play all sides until the pieces collapse. Richard taught me that, even if he never meant to. The sun rises over the city, painting everything in shades of blood and gold. Time to see who's really pulling the strings, and who's about to get tangled in them. The Morrison account was supposed to be Tyler's first major test. Instead, it becomes my first real move. I sit in the back of the conference room, watching him flounder through another presentation and carefully plant the seeds of doubt. Interesting approach, I murmur to the client when Tyler steps out. Though not quite what we discussed in the preliminary meetings. Mrs. Morrison's perfectly manicured nails tap against her tablet. You mean when you handled the account? Oh, I'm sure Tyler has his reasons for the changes. I pause, letting concern colour my voice. Though, if you'd prefer to discuss the original strategy. By the time Tyler returns, Mrs. Morrison's smile has gained a predatory edge. The meeting ends with polite promises to review their options. Derek catches me in the hallway afterward. That was cold. That was business. I keep walking, heels clicking against marble. Tyler wanted to play CEO. Let him learn how it feels to lose a $10 million account. And the 30 people whose jobs depend on that account. I falter for half a step. They'll land on their feet. Besides, better a controlled crash now than... Autumn. Maya appears around the corner, smooth as silk. Richard wants to see you. My stomach drops, but I keep my face neutral. In Richard's office, sunlight streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the man who taught me everything about power, including how to lose it. The Morrison account, he begins without preamble. They're considering pulling out. So I heard. Tyler seems to think you might have influenced their decision. I meet his gaze steadily. Tyler needs to learn that actions have consequences. Indeed, Richard's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Speaking of consequences, the board is concerned about recent performance metrics. They're suggesting a restructuring of senior management. The threat hangs between us. I think of Maya's files, of all the others Richard has destroyed. Interesting timing. Just business. He turns to the window. Though I'd hate to see your career suffer from poor choices. Like choosing loyalty over competence. His shoulders stiffen. Careful, Autumn. Family or not. Family? I laugh, sharp and bitter. Is that what you call it when you set your own son up to fail? He turns back slowly. What exactly are you implying? You know exactly what I'm implying. The doctored reports, the systematic dismantling of support structures. Did you use the same playbook on Sarah Chen, Marcus Rodriguez? For a moment, something like respect flickers across his face. Then it's gone, replaced by calculated concern. You seem stressed. Perhaps you should take some time off. To think about my future. I stand. Don't worry, Richard. I'm thinking about all our futures. Outside his office, Maya waits with a knowing smile. Productive meeting? You could say that. I start walking. She falls into step beside me. Tell me, Maya, how long did you work with Sarah Chen before Richard destroyed her? Her stride hitches. I don't. Because I've been looking at the old org charts. Funny how you always seem to be adjacent to the carnage, but never caught in it. We all make choices to survive. Her voice hardens. The question is, what choice are you making now? Before I can answer, Tyler bursts from the elevator, face flushed. The Morrisons just called. They're pulling their entire portfolio. Maya's eyebrows rise. All 7 subsidiaries. They're saying something about loss of confidence in leadership. Tyler's accusations hit like bullets. What did you say to them? Nothing they hadn't already figured out. I turn away, but his hand catches my arm. You're trying to sabotage me. Tyler, Maya interrupts smoothly. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. His grip tightens. I want to know why my own sister. Because someone had to show you what real leadership costs. I wrench free. Congratulations, little brother. You just learned your first lesson. I leave him standing there, Maya already moving to damage control. In my office, Derek waits with fresh intel. The Morrisons aren't just pulling out, he says quietly. They're taking their business to start-up media. My new shell company, created last week under layers of corporate veils. Phase 1 complete, I murmur, watching Tyler rush past my door, trailing destruction in his wake. Time for Phase 2. Autumn. Derek hesitates. Are you sure about this? Once you start, I'm sure about one thing. I pull up the next set of accounts targeted for restructuring. Richard taught us all about burning bridges. Now let's see how he likes watching his empire burn. The emergency board meeting feels like a funeral. 24 hours after the Morrison disaster, Silverstone's stock has plummeted 18%. I sit at the far end of the conference table, watching Tyler sweat through his expensive suit while Richard maintains his granite facade. 3 major accounts lost in 2 weeks. Board Chairman Phillips reads from his tablet. Projected quarterly losses exceeding 30 million. Would anyone care to explain? Maya slides a document across the table. Our analysis suggests a systematic breakdown in client relations under the new leadership structure. Breakdown, Tyler's voice cracks. More like sabotage. Autumn's been... Careful, brother. I keep my tone mild. Accusations require evidence. Richard's eyes narrow as I pull out my own folder. Speaking of evidence, I continue, I have some interesting documents regarding company management practices over the past decade. The color drains from his face. He knows exactly what I'm holding. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, he suggests. Why? Afraid of what the board might learn about your leadership training methods? I start distributing copies. About Sarah Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, all the others you built up just to tear down. Murmurs ripple through the room as board members scan the papers. Phillips removes his glasses slowly. Richard, these allegations are a desperate attempt at misdirection, Maya interrupts. The real issue is the current crisis. The real issue, I stand, is that this company has been run like a puppet show, and I'm done playing with strings. I trigger the presentation screen, displaying years of manipulated reports, doctored performance reviews, and carefully orchestrated failures. Tyler stares at the evidence of his own orchestrated downfall, comprehension dawning in his eyes. Dad? His voice sounds young, broken. You set me up. Tyler, I was preparing you. For what? I cut in. To fail spectacularly enough that the board would beg you to return, just like every other time. The room erupts in chaos. Board members demand explanations. Maya tries to seize control of the narrative, but I'm not done. Oh, and about those lost accounts? I pull up one final document. They're not lost. They're with Startup Media, my new company. Richard's mask finally cracks. You learned from the best. I smile. About burning bridges, destroying lives, all of it. How does it feel, watching your legacy crumble? The victory tastes like ashes when I see Tyler's devastated face. This was supposed to be about justice, but now... Security will escort you out, Philip says quietly. All of you, pending a full investigation. In the lobby, Tyler catches my arm. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually care about helping me? Before I can answer, Maya appears. Autumn? A word? She leads me aside, her smile sharp as broken glass. Brilliant performance. Almost had me convinced. She hands me her phone, displaying emails I've never seen. But you missed something. My blood freezes. The emails show conversations between Richard and Maya spanning years. Planning my downfall, not Tyler's. I was the target all along. Did you really think Richard would let an outsider run his company? She laughs softly. Tyler was just the bait, and you played your part perfectly. The evidence will be dismissed as fabricated once the board sees these. Your reputation, destroyed. Startup Media, about to face multiple lawsuits. She pats my cheek. Richard taught you well, but he taught me better. Security approaches. Maya steps back, victorious. By the way, Sarah Chen works for me now. Funny how things come full circle. I walk out of Silverstone Media for the last time, my carefully constructed revenge plot shattering around me. Derek waits by my car. They're freezing our accounts, he says quietly. All of them. Maya's team moved fast. Of course they did. I was so focused on Richard's game, I never saw the bigger trap. My phone buzzes. My mother. The family lawyers will handle everything, she says when I answer. But Autumn, don't come to Sunday dinner, not for a while. I watch Tyler leave the building, shoulders slumped, destroyed by the truth about both his father and his sister. Richard follows, already in damage control mode. Maya stands at the window above, queen of the castle I helped her claim. "What now?" Derek asks. I think of all the lives I've damaged in my quest for justice, of the legacy of destruction I've continued rather than ended. Now? My laugh sounds hollow even to me. Now we see if I learned anything from Richard besides how to burn it all down. 3 days after the board meeting, I find Sarah Chen waiting in my apartment. She sits at my kitchen counter, calm as if she belongs there, a familiar manila envelope between her hands. "Maya said you'd figure it out eventually." She slides the envelope toward me. "But I thought you deserved to know the whole truth." Inside, I find what Maya missed, evidence of her own manipulation. Years of careful orchestration, using both Richard and Tyler as pawns while she positioned herself for power. The same game Richard played, but with an extra layer of deception. "Why show me this?" Sarah's smile is tired. "Because Maya forgot one thing about people she destroys. We tend to remember." My phone buzzes. "Derek." "You need to see this. Maya's calling an emergency press conference. She's going to... I know exactly what she's going to do." I grab my keys, and I know exactly who's going to stop her. The Silverstone media lobby buzzes with reporters. Maya stands at the podium, resplendent in victory, while Richard and Tyler sit behind her like well-trained dogs. My mother and grandmother watch from the wings, their perfect family tableau finally shattered. "Today marks a new chapter," Maya begins, "as we address recent allegations of corporate misconduct." Funny you should mention misconduct. My voice carries across the room. Heads turn, cameras swivel. "I have some allegations of my own." Maya's smile doesn't waver. "Security won't help you." Sarah Chen emerges from the crowd, followed by Marcus Rodriguez and others, all Maya's previous victims. "Not with what we know." I approach the podium, each step measured. "You were right about one thing, Maya. Richard taught me well, but he didn't teach me everything." The evidence appears on the screen behind her, not just Richard's manipulations or Tyler's setup, but Maya's entire scheme. Years of careful documentation, preserved by those she thought she'd destroyed. "You see," I continue, "while you were watching Richard teach me about power, you missed the most important lesson, how to recognize when you're being played." Maya's composure cracks. "These documents are clearly fabricated, like the ones you planted about me." I turn to the board members present. Interesting timing on those emails, by the way. Almost like they were created after the fact. Richard stands slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You knew. All along, you knew what she was doing." "I learned from the best, remember?" My laugh holds no humor. "About watching your enemies destroy themselves while you just help things along." Tyler joins us at the podium, his face hard. "The Morrison account, you didn't just steal it, you protected it, from her." Maya moves with sudden desperation, but Sarah blocks her path. Around us, her carefully constructed house of cards collapses as former victims step forward with their own evidence. "Congratulations," I tell her softly. "You played everyone perfectly, except for one detail. You forgot to check who was really pulling the strings at Startup Media." Her eyes widen as she finally understands. Every client she thought I'd stolen, every account she'd helped me sabotage, all part of a larger plan to expose her own manipulation. "The board has heard enough." Chairman Philip steps forward. "Security will escort Ms. Maya to her office to collect her things. The authorities have some questions about certain financial irregularities." As Maya is led away, Richard approaches me. "You sacrificed everything, your reputation, your position, your own family, just to expose her." "No." I meet his gaze steadily. "I sacrificed everything to break the cycle. Your cycle, her cycle, all of it." I turn to leave, but Tyler catches my arm. "What happens now?" "Now?" I look at our fractured family, at the company built on manipulation and fear. "Now we learn how to build something new, something better, if you're interested." Behind us, reporters clamor for statements while Maya's empire crumbles. But I'm already walking away, Sarah and the others falling in step beside me. Sometimes victory isn't about who's left standing. It's about who's brave enough to walk away and start again. Derek waits by the door, grinning. Ready for phase 3? I think of all the lessons Richard taught me about power, all the ones Maya taught me about deception, and all the ones I had to learn myself about redemption. Phase 3, I agree. Let's build something worth saving this time. The new office of Phoenix Media overlooks the city from a different angle than Silverstone's tower. Smaller, but somehow it feels more real. Sarah Chen's team just landed their third major account, while Marcus Rodriguez's creative division continues exceeding expectations. Board meeting in 10, Derek announces, dropping a stack of reports on my desk. Tyler's waiting in the conference room. I find my brother studying our mission statement on the wall, building success through integrity. His suit is less expensive now, but he stands straighter. The Anderson portfolio looks promising, he says without turning, though the numbers need work. That's why I asked you to consult. I move beside him. You've learned a lot about what not to do, learned from the best. His smile holds a hint of old pain, but something else too. Understanding, maybe. Speaking of learning, did you see this? He hands me a tablet displaying Richard's resignation letter from Silverstone's board. The company's being restructured under new leadership. Someone named Claire Foster, a long-time middle manager I barely remember. Claire? I frown. Why her? Check her personnel file, the one Richard kept in his private records. The document makes my hands shake. Years of notes, careful observations, quiet mentoring. Richard had been grooming Claire all along, while the rest of us fought over shadows. He played us all, Tyler says quietly. But maybe he taught us something too, about what really matters in building something lasting. The conference room fills with my new team, former victims of corporate games turned architects of something better. Sarah Chen's financial models revolutionized our approach. Marcus Rodriguez's creative strategies attract clients tired of old power plays. Quarterly projections are up, Sarah begins, but more importantly, employee satisfaction scores. A familiar figure in the doorway cuts her off. My mother stands there, looking smaller than I remember. I won't stay, she says quickly. I just wanted you to have these. She places a box on the table. Old photos, newspaper clippings, documentation of every achievement Richard never acknowledged. At the bottom, a handwritten note. I should have seen you sooner. Ah. Evelyn still won't speak to me, my mother continues, but I'm learning to speak for myself. After she leaves, Tyler helps me sort through the box. We find pictures of ourselves as children, before power and position poisoned everything, before we learned the wrong lessons about success. You know, Tyler muses, I always thought Dad's greatest legacy would be Silverstone. But looking at this, he gestures around the office, at the people working together without fear or manipulation. Maybe his real legacy is what we learned not to be. The board meeting proceeds without power plays or hidden agendas. We discuss challenges openly, admit mistakes honestly, celebrate successes genuinely. It's harder this way, slower, but it feels clean. Later, I find one last photo in the box. Richard at my college graduation, actually smiling. On the back, in Claire Foster's handwriting, he saw the potential for something better in all of you. Derek appears with fresh coffee and a knowing look. So, ready to tell the team about the merger offer? I think about Silverstone's board wanting to combine forces, about Claire Foster's quiet revolution there, about second chances and better ways forward. Not yet, I decide. Some foundations need time to settle. Through the window, I can see both buildings now, Silverstone's imposing tower and our more modest office. Different shadows, different lessons. Tyler's already studying the merger proposals, but this time with questions about culture and values. not just power and profit. The photo of Richard goes into my desk drawer, not hidden, just waiting, like the possibility of reconciliation, of understanding that some victories don't look like what we expected. Sarah pokes her head in. New client meeting in 5. They're interested in our innovative corporate culture. I smile, thinking of all the ways we learned to build something new from the ruins of the old. Tell them we're ready, because that's the thing about shadows. They only have power when you let them define your light. And we're done living in anyone's shadow but our own.
The bell finally rang through the monotony, unleashing a cacophony of joyous shrieks and the thunderous slam of walkers. Lucia, basked in the bustling energy, a familiar scene that had colored my days for the past 17 years. Since earning my teaching degree, armed with boundless idealism, I had chosen this path despite my parents' well-meaning advice. They, ever so practical, had hoped I'd pursue something secure, like accounting or law. But the mere thought of being chained to numbers or tangled in legal debates sent shivers down my spine. Miss Looky. A tiny hand tugged at my sleeve. Glancing down, I saw Maggie, a slight girl with eyes as bright and curious as a starlit sky, bouncing eagerly on her toes. "Can I stay after school today? I finished all my homework, and I want to talk about that book you mentioned." A smile naturally found its way to my lips. Maggie was one of those rare gems who consumed knowledge voraciously. Most days, she'd linger after class, her mind bursting with questions about everything from the mysteries of black holes to the nuances of Shakespearean drama. "Of course, kiddo," I replied, playfully ruffling her hair. "But on one condition, we get a healthy snack first. No grand adventures on an empty stomach." She giggled, her laughter as infectious as ever. "Deal." As the school day wrapped up with a chorus of goodbyes, Maggie scampered toward the entrance, looking for her usual ride. Today, however, it wasn't her mother waiting, but a man I hadn't seen before. Tall and broad-shouldered, he greeted her with a warm smile that lit up his eyes. "Hey, Maggie," he boomed, bending down to her level. Maggie squealed with delight and jumped into his arms. "Uncle Liam, this is Ms. Looky, my favorite teacher." Liam extended his hand. "Liam Miller, nice to meet you. Maggie talks about you all the time." His handshake was firm, his gaze lingering just a moment longer than necessary. I felt a blush warm my cheeks as I stuttered a greeting. "So, Ms. Looky," Liam said with a playful twinkle in his eye, "you must be some kind of superhero to keep this little whirlwind focused all day." Maggie giggled, and I couldn't help but smile back. "She's a bright one, that's for sure. A joy to teach." Over the following weeks, Liam became a familiar face at afternoon pickups, and our initial awkwardness gradually gave way to relaxed, engaging conversations. He was witty and insightful, and spoke about more than just kid-related matters. One afternoon, while Maggie was lost in a book I had lent her, Liam stayed back after the bell had rung. "Listen, Ms. Looky," he began, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "This might sound a bit sudden, but would you like to grab a coffee sometime? Just the two of us, of course." My heart raced as I replied quicker than I had expected. Sure." That coffee led to dinner, then to drinks, and soon to stolen moments whenever we could manage. We fell for each other quickly, caught up in a whirlwind romance of stolen glances and late-night texts. A year later, Liam slipped a diamond ring onto my finger, his eyes reflecting the joy in mine. We married in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family, sealing our shared journey with a kiss. At first, my parents were wary of my whirlwind romance with Liam, but his effortless charm soon won them over. Life seemed idyllic. I had a loving husband, a supportive mother-in-law, and an energetic niece, Maggie, who spent most weekends with us. Liam's sister, Kayla, however, was a different story altogether. With her fiery red hair and a penchant for tight skirts, Kayla was the embodiment of chaos. Most evenings, Liam would field frantic calls from her, often ending with him rolling his eyes, exasperated by yet another dramatic episode. Kayla, for her part, barely tolerated me. Each visit was peppered with snide remarks about my boring life choices and jealous jibes at our seemingly perfect family dynamic. One night, after Kayla made a particularly cutting comment about my old-fashioned values, I reached my breaking point. As soon as she left, I turned to Liam, frustration seething within me. "Liam," I whispered sharply, "Maggie needs more stability. Can't you see? Your sister wouldn't know responsibility if it bit her." Liam, visibly irritated, retorted, "She's my sister, Lucia." The tension boiled over. "And Maggie's your niece. How long will you pretend everything's fine? That girl deserves a real parent, not just a sporadic entertainer." Liam stormed out, leaving me seething alone in our living room. It wasn't the first time we'd clashed over Kayla, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. A seed of worry had planted itself in my mind, a worry that would soon grow into a full-blown storm. Months after the initial euphoria of our wedding, it was time for a more serious conversation. We sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the remnants of our takeout dinner. I tried to keep my voice even. "Liam, we need to talk about finances," he sighed, leaning back. "Finances? Lucia, we agreed on a shared account, remember? 50/50ths. "It seems like you haven't been contributing much lately," I said, the weight of my words filling the room with tension. Liam frowned. "Yeah, well, Kayla's going through a tough time again. She needed some help with Maggie and all." My frustration resurfaced. "Liam, we can't keep bailing her out every month. We have our bills and groceries." "Look, Kayla's family. I have to help her," he replied defensively. "And what about our family? Isn't Maggie part of our family too? You're spending our money on their expenses," I countered, my voice rising. Liam slammed his fist on the table, startling me. "Don't you get it, Lucia? They need it more than we do. You keep the house clean. That's your contribution. Stop nagging about every dime." The harshness in his voice shocked me. This wasn't the easygoing Liam I had fallen in love with. This was a man burdened with secrets and growing resentment. I swallowed hard, refusing to be intimidated. "That's not fair, Liam. We agreed on a system, and you're breaking it," he scoffed. "Life happens, honey. Deal with it." With that, he stormed out, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the kitchen. The takeout turned to ash in my mouth. Liam's outburst confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't just about Kayla's current rough patch. It was a recurring pattern. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, a knot of worry tightening in my stomach. The next few months passed in a blur, with Liam ceasing his financial contributions. Every time I tried to discuss our issues, Liam would deflect with a weak excuse or a dismissive comment. The bills began to accumulate, and I found myself dipping into my savings and then relying on my salary to keep our household running. It felt as though I was the sole provider for a family that wasn't truly mine. The most disheartening part was that Liam seemed indifferent. His evenings were consumed by his phone, taking calls from Kayla or mysteriously vanishing for hours. The man I had fallen in love with, who had promised a shared future, was slowly becoming a stranger, his secrets driving a growing wedge between us. As months dragged on, each day mirrored the previous one in monotony. Liam's absences lengthened, and his excuses grew increasingly flimsy. He would disappear for entire evenings, his phone always set to silent. On the rare occasions he was home, his visits were brief, just a quick hello and goodbye, his attention perpetually fixed on his phone. Even family dinners at my in-laws turned into a painful act, with Liam like a ghost at his table, offering only half-hearted greetings before retreating to hushed phone calls outside. One evening, after another dinner marked by strained silence, I reached my breaking point. Liam, barely acknowledging my presence, idly pushed his food around his plate. "Liam," I began, my voice tight with pent-up frustration, "we need to talk." He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "About what, honey?" "About you. About us. About where you disappear to all the time," I blurted out, my emotions spilling over. Liam sighed dramatically, an over-the-top show of exasperation. "Look, I'm swamped at work. It's a demanding time." "Work?" I scoffed, disbelief seething. You haven't worked late in months. What's going on, Liam? He pushed back from the table, his expression hardening. This isn't up for discussion. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I challenged, raising my voice. Because all I understand right now is that there's a stranger living in my house. The ensuing silence was chilling. Liam stared at me, jaw clenched, then abruptly left the room. I sank back, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his indifference. Days turned into weeks, and Liam's absences became a constant. He ignored my calls and texts, leaving the silence in our once vibrant home to echo his disappearance. One morning, I awoke to find an empty bed and a stark realization. I was alone. Driven by desperation, I poured my emotions into an email, articulating my frustration, loneliness, and the life we had promised each other. I demanded answers for his constant disappearances and a fair share of the financial responsibilities. Clicking send felt like tossing a stone into an abyss, my words vanishing into the vast emptiness of our crumbling marriage. The silence that followed was a harsh confirmation of my fears. No apology, no explanation, just an overwhelming void. But as the sun set, casting angry shades of orange and red across the sky, I discovered a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table. Stark white against the worn-wood lay divorce papers, signed by Liam. My breath hitched, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. I grabbed the papers, the words blurring before my eyes. Rage surged through me, hotter and more intense than I had ever felt. I slammed my phone down, dialing his number with trembling fingers. The call went to voicemail. I left a fiery message, demanding an explanation for the papers and for everything he had put me through. As I reached out again, all I got was the cold, mechanical voice of his answering system. I dialed over and over, a desperate hope clinging to me, yearning for the sound of his voice. But when a voice finally broke through the silence, it wasn't Liam's. Instead, it was a brash, youthful voice, heavy with entitlement. "Who is this?" she drawled. My heart sank as I managed to whisper, "It's Lucia, Liam's wife." Her laugh was chilling. "Wife. Oh, honey, you're old news. Liam's all about the future, and that's me. So, you might want to find a new place to hang your hat, okay?" The phone slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the counter with a soft thud. My world crumbled, the cruel reality settling heavily in my stomach like a stone. Betrayal, sharp and searing, coursed through me. Tears blurred my vision as I fled the apartment. The divorce papers crumpled tightly in my hand. I needed someone strong. My mother-in-law was that person. I drove to her house in a daze. When I reached her doorstep and knocked, she opened the door, her eyes wide at my distressed appearance. Without a word, I fell into her arms, my emotions bursting forth. She held me, her gentle comfort soothing the deep wounds in my soul as I poured out my heart, Liam's deceit and treachery. A spark of anger flickered across her face. "Lucia, you'll stay with us," she declared, her voice steady. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. This wasn't the life I had envisioned, but stepping into the house, I felt a small hand tug at my coat. It was Maggie, Liam's niece, her eyes wide with concern. "Auntie Lucia, what's wrong?" she asked softly. I knelt and hugged her. "It's okay, sweetie. Everything will be all right." Holding Maggie close, a new resolve fortified me. This new chapter wasn't just about picking up the pieces. It was about rebuilding a life grounded in genuine trust and love, not just hollow promises. Though the path ahead was daunting, I knew I wouldn't walk it alone. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered, but I was determined not to let it defeat me. My first stop? The office of Remy Miller, a formidable attorney known for her sharp mind and even sharper courtroom demeanor. Her office was a mix of sleek chrome, expensive suits, and the subtle scent of fine cigars. As I entered, my gaze was suspicious. It was clear this wasn't just about late nights at the office. It was something deeper, something he'd tried hard to hide. With a hardened resolve, I faced Remy. "Divorce," I said firmly, the word heavy in the air. "And financial compensation. Interest flickered in Remy's eyes. Compelling, Lucia, but accusations alone won't suffice. We need solid evidence to expose your husband and his secrets. That evidence would come through Mr. Matthias, a private investigator with a knack for sniffing out trouble. Mr. Matthias, with his weathered face etched like an old map, took a hefty stack of cash from me and got straight to work. Days turned into weeks, with the only sound in my now empty apartment being the relentless ticking of the clock. Then, on a particularly gloomy and rainy evening, Mr. Matthias appeared at my door, clutching a manila folder like a lifeline. "This," he grunted in a voice rough as gravel, "might be just what you need." My heart pounded as I hastily flipped through the contents of the folder, transcripts and audio recordings that splintered my heart anew with each word. The voices of Kayla, my so-called sister-in-law, and her conspiring friends filled the room, each sentence a stab of betrayal. "He's loaded," one friend envied aloud. "Practically prints his own money." Kayla's laugh was cold and hollow. "That apartment of his is a gold mine. Once I get Liam to marry me, we'll convince him to sell it. Then there's Maggie's supposed medical treatments. We could make a killing splitting that." A chill swept through me. Kayla, the parasite, had been exploiting Liam, and her friend, his lover, was a willing accomplice in their scheme to strip him of everything. My cozy apartment was not a family home to her. It was a ticket to luxury, and Liam was merely a pawn in their twisted game. With this damning evidence in hand, I returned to Remy's office, fury simmering within me. Remy listened intently, her eyes sharp with a calculating glint as the recordings played. "Bingo, Lucia," she murmured, a sly smile creeping across her face. "This is solid gold. It's time to make these deceivers pay." Yet, amidst my swirling storm of anger, a pang of worry struck me. Liam was naive and duped, yes, but innocent Maggie, his niece, was unwittingly caught in her mother's greedy plot. I couldn't bear to see her hurt by the fallout. Rather than confronting Liam or Kayla directly, I opted for a subtler approach. I called my mother-in-law, Mary, urgency sharpening my tone. "We need to meet. Something big has come up," I told her. By the next evening, the air was tense as we gathered around the dining table. Me, Liam, his visibly upset parents, and lastly, Kayla, who swaggered in reeking of alcohol and defiance. Before I could speak, Kayla exploded. "Can you believe it? Child Protective Services just stormed into my place, accusing me of being unfit. They've taken Maggie to some shelter." Disgust tightened in my throat as she ranted, portraying herself as a victim while scheming against her own family. It was then, with a voice steadier than I felt, that I interrupted her. "Actually, Kayla," I said, leaning forward, my voice calm but firm, "I was the one who called Child Protective Services." The room fell dead silent. Kayla's eyes widened, her drunken haze momentarily clearing. Liam looked at me, confusion written all over his face. "You did what?" Kayla shrieked, her voice edged with fury. "Because, Kayla," I continued, unwavering, "you are a terrible person. You've been using your brother just to enrich yourself." I watched as the reality of her deeds began to dawn on everyone in the room, my resolve firm. This was about protecting Maggie and exposing the truth, no matter how painful. As I confronted Kayla, her willingness to sacrifice her daughter to achieve her selfish goals was laid bare. "Maggie deserves better than this," I declared, just as Kayla, overcome with fury, lunged at me. Her face was twisted in rage, but before she could reach me, Liam, usually slow to react, intervened, grabbing her arms and holding her back. "Get your hands off me!" Kayla screamed, struggling against Liam's hold, her efforts futile. "You're both done for. You'll regret this." Liam, still looking confused, finally asked me, "What's all this about, Lucia?" I pressed play on the recorder, letting the incriminating conversation between Kayla and her friend fill the room. As Liam listened, his face paled, and a mix of shame and disbelief washed over him. He was hearing his sister's true view of him, a mere cash machine to be exploited. Cornered and desperate, Kayla exploded. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, her voice trembling. You have no right to meddle in our family matters. This isn't your place. Ignoring her tantrum, I kept my eyes on Liam. This was his moment of truth, the moment he would see his sister for the scheming manipulator she truly was. My mother-in-law, Mary, usually the epitome of composure, joined in. "Kayla, how could you?" Her voice, now cold with disappointment, confronted Kayla's betrayal. "This? Betrayal?" Kayla scoffed, her expression twisted. "Please spare me the drama. This was the plan all along. Cozy up to Liam, secure the apartment, and then target your retirement funds next," she sneered, her voice filled with malice. Mary and her husband, Henry, were visibly shaken by the revelation, their faces reflecting the sting of betrayal. As for Kayla, she spiraled further, her rant peppered with slurs and curses, a stark contrast to the calculated facade she had maintained before. Turning to Liam, I met his gaze. "Well, Liam," I said, my voice steady, "the evidence of your infidelity and her scheming is undeniable. Now, let's discuss financial compensation." Liam opened his mouth, possibly to ask for forgiveness, but I raised my hand, stopping him. "There's nothing more to discuss," I said firmly. "You had your chance. Now it's time for me to move on." The judge's gavel eventually came down, marking the end of a tumultuous chapter in my life. Divorce granted, financial compensation secured. Justice, albeit bittersweet, was served. Kayla and her deceitful friend faced charges of attempted fraud, their dreams of luxury dissolving as quickly as cheap scent. Maggie, unfortunately, remained the most affected. The ensuing custody battles tore through the family court. In a dramatic twist, it was revealed that Kayla's ex wasn't Maggie's biological father. The truth, stubborn and unyielding, refused to stay buried. With no known father and an unfit mother, the judge awarded custody of Maggie to Mary. Her once quiet home transformed into a vibrant sanctuary. Mary, though initially overwhelmed, found a new purpose in raising Maggie. Together, we all settled into an unlikely new normal, building a life of stability and love for Maggie amidst the ruins of past deceptions. In our new, surprisingly functional routine, one quiet evening unfolded with Maggie, a bundle of blonde curls and boundless energy, climbing into my lap. "Mother isn't coming back, is she?" she asked, her small voice barely above a whisper. A lump formed in my throat as I replied gently, "No, honey, she isn't. But you're stuck with me now." A smile, as bright as a sunflower, spread across her face. "Good," she declared, wrapping her arms around me tightly. "I love you more than glitter and ice cream combined." However, life soon delivered a startling turn. It happened on a typical Friday evening. Mary and Henry, my former in-laws, sat across from me, their expressions a complex tapestry of sadness and determination. "We've changed the will," Henry stated bluntly, his voice rough. "The house, the savings, everything will go to you and Maggie." My jaw dropped in disbelief. "But why?" I managed to ask, completely taken aback. Mary reached out and squeezed my hand, her eyes brimming with a mix of profound emotions. "You opened our eyes, Lucia," she explained softly. "We see Liam for who he really is now, a spineless man, too easily swayed by his sister." "But what about Liam?" I asked hesitantly. He was still their son, after all. Henry's expression hardened. "Blood doesn't mean everything," he replied sternly. "He made his choices, and now he must live with the consequences." Mary added, her voice resolute, "You and Maggie, you're the family we have left. You've stood by us, by Maggie, and that's worth more than any blood tie." Life marched steadily onward from there. The house, once hollow with silence, now resonated with the sound of Maggie's infectious laughter and Mary's wise guidance. We had become an unlikely family, cobbled together from heartbreak and resilience, but somehow, it worked beautifully. We were a patchwork of love and new beginnings, a testament to the unexpected paths life can take us down. As I meandered through the local park, the melody of classic rock tunes filled the air from my headphones, creating the perfect backdrop for a carefree afternoon. The gentle breeze complemented the peaceful solitude I enjoyed after finishing a demanding coding sprint for an app one was developing. Working remotely offered its comforts, like the freedom to wear pajamas well into the afternoon without judgment. As I navigated a curve near the venerable old oak tree, my serene world was suddenly shattered. I collided with something, or rather someone, who felt as immovable as a brick wall. My phone soared through the air as my headphones were yanked from my ears. I managed a surprised gasp, mirroring the stranger's reaction. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, scrambling to my feet and hastily dusting off my jeans. The brick wall turned out to be a young man about my age, with tousled brown hair and a reassuringly sheepish smile. He had already retrieved my phone and was checking it for damage. "No worries, but maybe keep an eye out next time you're jamming out," he joked, handing me my undamaged phone. "Thanks, and you're right, I was totally lost in the music." "I'm Cheryl," I introduced myself, still slightly embarrassed but grateful for his easygoing demeanor. "I'm Brian," he replied, his interest piqued as he glanced at my phone. "Seems like you have great taste in music." We both shared a laugh, and I noticed he was holding a frisbee. "Do you play?" I asked, pointing at it. "Yeah, I was about to start a game, but my friends bailed." "Do you want to play?" "Not really, but I'm up for trying something new," I said with a shrug. I had no other plans, and he seemed like good company. "Cool, I'll show you how to play then," Brian said with an infectious smile, sparking my curiosity about him even more. We spent the next hour tossing the frisbee and chatting about everything from our favorite bands to our jobs. It turned out Brian was an engineer at a local tech startup, which gave us plenty to talk about since we were both in the tech industry. The conversation flowed effortlessly, much like talking to an old friend. As the sun began to set, Brian checked his watch. "Are you hungry?" I was planning to grab a bite at the cafe across the street. "Want to join me?" I realized I was quite hungry. "Sure, let's go. But just so you know, if they have chili fries, I'm not sharing," I warned him playfully. "Ha, challenge accepted." "Let's see if their chili fries live up to the hype," he chuckled as we walked toward the cafe. By the time we parted ways, it was clear this wasn't just a one-time encounter. Brian asked for my number and I gladly gave it to him, feeling that exhilarating buzz that comes when you sense the start of something special. After several months of dating, things with Brian were going wonderfully. However, like every romantic tale bathed in perpetual sunlight, there was bound to be a shadow. In our story, that shadow was Mary, Brian's mother. "So, you're finally going to meet my mom," Brian mentioned one Saturday morning over breakfast, his expression a mix of amusement and caution. "Just a heads up, she's pretty intense," he warned. "Oh? Like secret government conspiracy intense or believes in aliens intense?" I joked, trying to keep the mood light. "More like she reads your horoscope and judges your life choices intensely," he replied with a shake of his head, preparing me for an interesting encounter. Later that day, Brian and I made our way to his mother Mary's place, which looked like it had jumped right out of a glossy TV show, with its impeccable landscaping and an air of eerie perfection. Brian knocked, and almost immediately, the door swung open to reveal Mary. She stood there in a vibrant floral dress that seemed to declare her dominance over the household. "Brian, and you must be Cheryl," Mary said, sizing me up as if I were an exhibit in her personal museum. Come in, come in." Stepping inside, I felt like I had been transported back to the 1960s. The living room was a shrine to that era's decor, complete with a massive bookshelf brimming with astrology books and, believe it or not, a crystal ball perched on the coffee table. Without wasting a moment, Mary turned to me, her curiosity barely contained. "So, Cheryl, when's your birthday?" she inquired the moment we settled onto her vintage floral couch. "April 19th, I replied, slightly thrown off by her abrupt dive into astrology. "Aries, huh? She murmured, brow furrowed as she consulted one of her many books. "And Brian here is a Pisces. Not the best match, astrologically speaking, you do know that, right?" Brian rolled his eyes at me, an apologetic look on his face. Mom, come on, not everyone believes in that stuff. But they should, especially when it comes to important life decisions, Mary countered sharply, giving me a piercing look. You see, Cheryl, Aries are headstrong and impulsive, and Pisces are dreamers, sensitive. It can lead to conflicts, you know. I wasn't sure how to react to being analyzed like a character in her astrological play just minutes after meeting her. Well, we've been getting along just fine so far, I said, trying to keep the peace but also standing my ground. Mary hummed disapprovingly, her fingers drumming on her astrology book. We'll see about that. Life's not just about the good times, dear. The rest of the visit was just as awkward. Mary kept talking about ensuring compatibility and the dangers of retrogrades. It was almost surreal hearing all that came out of her. Brian was extremely apologetic as we drove home. Sorry about that. She can be a bit much, he confessed, clearly embarrassed. A bit much, Brian? She basically suggested we're doomed because I'm an Aries, I half-joked, trying to lighten the mood, though I was a bit stung by the whole ordeal. Driving back, I pondered over everything. Mary was definitely formidable, but I was not about to let her or her astrological chart steer my relationship. I liked Brian, and no cosmic misalignment was going to deter me. Fast forward a year, and despite all the astrological hurdles Mary tried to place in our path, Brian proposed. We were at our favorite pizza place when he nervously slid the ring box across the table. Cheryl, will you marry me? He blurted out, almost spilling his drink. I was so surprised that I nearly choked on my pizza slice. Hell yes, I exclaimed after regaining my composure. The restaurant erupted in applause, and there I was, crying, overwhelmed by the moment. Planning the wedding, however, was far from simple. Between drafting a guest list and selecting a venue, Mary's incessant commentary was the last thing we needed. You know, Cheryl, Mars is in retrograde around your wedding date. That's not a good sign, she cautioned one afternoon as we reviewed floral arrangements at my place. I rolled my eyes so hard they nearly got stuck. Mary's penchant for cosmic caution was becoming a real test of patience. Ignoring astrological signs, Brian and I set our wedding date based on the availability of our favorite venue, a place that held special meaning for us. When the big day arrived, it was perfect. Sunny skies and mild temperatures set the scene, and all our friends and family were there, enjoying themselves. Even Mary managed to crack a smile, though it seemed a bit strained. After the ceremony, during the reception, Mary pulled me aside. Her face was serious, echoing our previous conversations. Cheryl, I still think you should reconsider this union. You might be happy now, but what about when the stars shift, she warned. I had reached my limit. Mary, I'm married to your son now, and I'm not reconsidering anything. We're happy, and that's what matters. Her lips pursed slightly, and she scanned the room as if expecting celestial signs to intervene. You're ignoring the signs, Cheryl, but remember, I warned you.
Duly noted, Mary.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to dance with my husband at our wedding, which, by the way, is going wonderfully despite the bad signs, I replied, turning away to join Brian, who gave me a supportive thumbs up from across the room. We spent the rest of the evening dancing, laughing, and savoring every moment. Life as a newlywed felt like a sweet dream, but as with all dreams, reality has a way of asserting itself. Mary's relentless comments were that reality for me. Every visit seemed to carry the weight of her disapproval. One Sunday afternoon at her house, I hoped for a peaceful gathering, but Mary had other plans. So, Cheryl, she started as she served tea. Still no good news on the baby front? You know, I read that some people are just cursed with bad energy. I nearly choked on my tea. Mary, really? That's not how it works. We've seen the doctor. Everything's fine. These things take time. Or maybe it's just not meant to be, she shrugged, sipping her tea as if she hadn't just suggested something so outrageous. Fuming but feeling Brian's hand squeeze mine under the table, a silent plea to stay calm, I changed the subject. Actually, we've been house hunting. Found a great place, and we're thinking of putting down an offer. Mary's interest was piqued. A house, huh? And how are you affording that? Brian's doing well, but houses aren't cheap. Proud of our independence and financial stability, I responded, Actually, I've been doing well with app development. We're putting in equal amounts. She set down her cup a bit too hard. Well, isn't that convenient? Living off my son, and now spending his money on a house, she scoffed. We left soon after, her words stinging. No matter how hard I worked or what I achieved, it seemed I could never change her view of me. The process of buying a house was a refreshing change compared to dealing with Mary. We found a beautiful place that was perfect for us and moved in a few months later. I hoped that owning our new home would prove to Mary that I wasn't the gold digger she painted me to be, but it only seemed to fuel her suspicions further. At our housewarming, which Mary attended more out of obligation than anything, she pulled me aside while Brian was busy with other guests. Must be nice, living large on someone else's dime, she remarked snidely. We both understand the situation, don't we? Just ensure he remains unaware of your clandestine adventures, she whispered, eyes darting around to confirm our privacy. I stared back, a mix of shock and indignation coloring my response. What are you suggesting? I have never been unfaithful to Brian, and I never will. How could you accuse me of such a thing? She simply smirked and walked away, leaving me to simmer in anger. Later, whispers reached me through friends that Mary was tarnishing my reputation, labeling me as unfaithful and a parasite on Brian. That was my breaking point. When Brian and I were finally alone, I aired my grievances. Your mother is spreading terrible rumors about me, Brian. I'm at my wit's end. Brian's anger matched mine. She did what? That's it. I'm going to talk to her. This needs to stop. He confronted Mary, warning her to cease her accusations or she'd no longer be welcome in our home. Mary reacted poorly to his ultimatum, accusing me over the phone the next day. You're trying to alienate me from my son, you witch. I know your game, bringing men over when Brian's not here. I'm not blind. Her words were intended to wound, but they no longer held sway over me. Believe what you wish, Mary, but if you continue this slander, you'll regret it. This is my home, and I refuse to be intimidated here. After we curtailed her visits, peace returned temporarily, but it felt like the calm before another storm. The unease began anew one day at the supermarket. As I loaded groceries into my car, a prickly sensation crept up my spine, the unsettling feeling of being watched. I scanned my surroundings and spotted a man at the edge of the parking lot, his gaze fixed on me. Although it felt odd, I dismissed it as paranoia. However, the feeling persisted. Days later, at a cafe near our home, the same man was there again, feigning interest in a newspaper but clearly observing me. My pulse quickened. Was I being followed? When I spotted him a third time, standing across the street from our house, panic set in. This was no coincidence. He was tracking me. That evening, I confided in Brian. There's this man I keep seeing around, and it feels like he's following me. Brian was concerned, but suggested a rational approach. Are you sure? Maybe you're just stressed. Why not take a few days off? Do some yoga, relax? Though skeptical, I agreed to try. I resumed my yoga and meditation, hoping to ease my mind, but the sense of being watched persisted. Finally, unable to shake my suspicions, I returned to the supermarket. As predicted, he was there. Confronting him, I demanded answers, phone camera at the ready. Why are you following me? Who are you? He seemed startled and tried to leave, but I was quicker, snapping pictures. I've called the police, I lied, provoking a panicked response. Wait, listen, I'm not here to harm you. I'm a private investigator. I can't disclose more. Later, in our house parking lot, Brian demanded the truth, physically restraining him. Talk now, or I'm calling the cops. Under pressure, he confessed. Look, I was hired by your mother. She wanted evidence of infidelity, but I swear I found nothing. There's nothing to find, Brian exclaimed as he dialed Mary's number. Mom, why on earth would you hire someone to follow Cheryl? Don't show up at our house again. You're not welcome anymore. The next day, Brian was a whirlwind of action, installing security cameras around our home. With stunts like these, who knows what else she might try, he said, his words tinged with frustration. After the unsettling events with Mary and the unsettling private investigator, Brian proposed the perfect antidote, a vacation just for the two of us, away from the turmoil. We found ourselves in a quaint beach town, surrounded only by the soothing sounds of waves and seagulls. It was the ideal retreat. For the first time in ages, I relaxed under the sun with a book, free from prying eyes or hidden motives. When we returned home, I carried with me a newfound peace, which only deepened when I discovered something miraculous. I was pregnant. After years of trying and enduring Mary's harshness, it had finally happened. But with the joy came a fierce protectiveness. Considering Mary's recent behavior, the last thing I wanted was to expose our newfound happiness to any risk. We chose to keep the pregnancy a secret, especially from Mary. "Let's just share this with my parents for now," I suggested to Brian, who was ecstatic about the news. "I don't want my mom's negativity ruining this," he agreed. "We'll announce it to everyone else when we're ready." Working from home made it easier to conceal my growing belly. I switched to looser shirts and flowy dresses whenever I went out, though there wasn't much to hide yet. I was past my first trimester, but surprisingly, there wasn't much of a bump. During a checkup, I voiced my concerns to my doctor, who reassured me with a smile. "Every woman's body is different, Cheryl. As long as the baby is healthy and the scans are normal, there's no need to worry." As weeks turned into months, the little life growing inside me remained a cherished secret shared only with Brian and my parents. We spent evenings in the future nursery, discussing and dreaming. "I think we should paint it yellow," Brian suggested one evening, imagining the room bathed in a cheerful, sunny hue. "Yellow's nice, bright and happy," I agreed, envisioning our baby in their crib against a vibrant backdrop. This little bubble of joy was ours to cherish, and for the time being, that was all that mattered. Although Mary's shadow loomed at the edge of our joy, inside our home, within our growing family, we felt secure. 7 months in, with my pregnancy now clearly visible, Brian and I decided it was time to celebrate openly with all our family and friends, even Mary. Perhaps, we thought, if she saw the beauty and reality of our situation, she might abandon her grudge. We planned a big celebration at our home, decorating the backyard with lights and flowers. I felt like royalty, gliding among our guests, Brian at my side. The air buzzed with excitement and congratulations from nearly everyone, except Mary, who arrived late with a stormy expression. I steeled myself for whatever she might say or do next. I had been hopeful that Mary would maintain her composure for the special day, but my optimism was short-lived. As I mingled with guests, Mary's voice carried over the crowd. She was audibly accusing me of a circle of relatives. "This is all an act," she declared loudly. "She's not pregnant. It's just a scheme to trap Brian and drain his finances." Her biting words were painful to hear, but I was determined not to let her spoil the celebration. I approached her, smoothing my dress and attempting to speak calmly. "Mary, could we talk for a moment?" I asked. She sized me up with a skeptical look. "What's there to discuss? You think you can deceive everyone, but you can't fool me." Taking a deep breath to stay composed, I replied, "I am genuinely pregnant, Mary. It's mine and Brian's baby. Can we put our differences aside, just for today, for the baby's sake?" Her response was a scornful laugh. "You're incredible. Do you really expect me to believe this farce?" Trying to avoid a scene, I persisted. "Mary, please. This is a time for celebration. Let's enjoy it." She snorted dismissively and walked away, heading upstairs. I hesitated, then followed, worried she might continue her slanderous talk. Upstairs, I found her visibly angry. "Mary, why can't you be happy for us? In a month, you'll see. There's going to be a real baby," I tried to assure her. She spun around, her eyes icy. "There is no baby. You've always been a fraud, Cheryl." Her words hurt, and I felt tears well up. "I don't understand why you're doing this, but it has to stop," I said, turning to leave. As I began descending the stairs, a sudden push caught me off guard. I lost my footing and fell, the room spinning as I plummeted down. When I regained consciousness, I was under the bright lights of a hospital room, surrounded by the beeping of monitors. The pain was overwhelming. Brian was by my side, his face filled with worry. "Cheryl, thank God you're awake. How do you feel?" he asked urgently. "Where's the baby?" I gasped, panic seizing me. Brian's expression grew even more concerned as he held my hand tightly. "They had to induce labor after your fall. He's on life support but fighting hard," he explained softly. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to speak. "Is he going to be okay?" "They're doing all they can," Brian reassured me, wiping away my tears. The memory of the fall haunted me. Being shoved, the terror of the tumble, and Mary's face just before I turned to descend the stairs. "Brian," I said, my voice stronger despite the fear. Mary pushed me. "She did it." Brian looked pained and confused. "No, Cheryl. It must have been an accident." "It wasn't," I insisted, frustration mounting. "Please check the cameras." He nodded, standing with a heavy heart and leaving to check. After a tense wait, he returned, his face ashen. "I saw it," he said quietly. "You were right. The video confirmed everything. My mom pushed you," Brian said, his voice strained as he dialed the police. I caught only snippets of his conversation, his words short and his tone a blend of anger and disbelief. After he hung up, he explained that his mother was being taken into custody. The following days were a whirlwind. Our son, tiny and delicate, battled for his life in the neonatal intensive care unit, his small form enveloped by beeping machines and attentive nurses. I spent every waking moment praying, my entire being focused on the tiny, fragile life in that incubator. Mary faced charges, and a trial soon followed. Her defense was almost laughable. She insisted it was all a prank meant to expose what she believed was a lie about my pregnancy. "I didn't mean any harm," she protested in court. "I just wanted everyone to see the truth." However, the evidence against her was irrefutable. The video clearly showed her actions. The judge found her guilty, sentencing her to 3 years in prison and mandating restitution. The sale of her house was ordered to cover our son's extensive medical and rehabilitation costs. Time moved forward, and with each passing month, our son grew stronger. The rehabilitation process was grueling, filled with endless appointments and therapies. Yet he was resilient, gradually catching up to his peers. By his 2nd birthday, you wouldn't have guessed he had such a challenging start. Through it all, Brian and I grew closer, our bond fortified by the adversity we faced. As for Mary, her actions irreparably damaged any possibility of reconciliation. Brian and I agreed that it was best for her to remain out of our and our son's lives, a tough but necessary decision for our family's safety and happiness. Now, as I watch our son, healthy, joyful, and bursting with energy, I feel an overwhelming sense of tranquility. It feels as though, against all odds, the universe has shifted to favor us. The ominous cloud that Mary cast over our lives has dissolved. What remains is the luminous path ahead for our small family, glowing brighter and more promising than ever before. My name is Pamela Ruth, and I would never have imagined myself sharing this tale. Raised in a family of substantial wealth, I was the sole child of Ruth and Madison Ruth. My father, a self-made businessman, had forged his empire from nothing. He was a stern yet affectionate man who always encouraged me to strive for excellence. In contrast, my mother was a paragon of grace and elegance, effortlessly navigating the upper echelons of society. Our home was a vast mansion on the city's outskirts, providing me every conceivable luxury, from the finest education and designer clothes to vacations in exotic locales. Despite these material comforts, a void lingered within me. Then, during my last year of college, I met Terry Roy. Meeting him struck me like lightning. He was charismatic and attractive, and seemed to understand me in a way no one else had. We began dating, and for the first time, I felt genuinely vibrant and alive. However, this didn't sit well with my parents. One evening, over dinner, my mother delicately suggested that Terry might be more attracted to our family's wealth than to me. My father, with a stern expression, dismissed Terry as a man without prospects or ambition, unable to provide the lifestyle I was accustomed to. But I countered fiercely, asserting that love was what truly mattered. The situation escalated when Terry proposed in a simple, heartfelt manner in the very park where we'd had our first date. When I informed my parents of my decision to marry him, my father issued an ultimatum. Choosing Terry would mean being disowned. Tears in my eyes, I pleaded for their happiness for me. But my father remained unyielding, and my mother stood by him, her face etched with disappointment. That night, with a heavy but determined heart, I left my parents' home. I moved into Terry's modest apartment, a stark contrast to my previous life of luxury. The wedding preparations were hectic and filled with anticipation, yet I held out hope that my parents would change their minds. As the wedding day drew near without a sign from them, the realization hit hard. However, as I walked down the aisle, seeing Terry's gaze filled with love, all my doubts and the sadness of my parents' absence dissipated. In that moment, only the love we shared mattered. After the wedding, we moved into a luxurious apartment downtown, an inheritance from my beloved grandfather. It was a beautiful space with high ceilings and a panoramic city view, far removed from Terry's previous living situation. I poured my heart into making it our home, decorating it with care as we started our new life together. Despite the initial challenges and the estrangement from my parents, choosing to follow my heart with Terry felt like the truest path I could have taken. As Terry and I navigated the early days of our marriage, he dedicated himself to his career at a local marketing agency, often returning home late, but always greeting me with a smile and a loving kiss. Meanwhile, I focused on making our new apartment a cozy home and spent my spare time volunteering at a local animal shelter. About a year and a half into our marriage, everything took a dramatic turn. I discovered I was pregnant. Holding the positive test, my emotions swung wildly between joy and apprehension. When I shared the news with Terry, his delight was unmistakable. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he lifted me in a celebratory twirl, exclaiming, "We're going to be parents, Pamela. This is amazing." The arrival of our son Zachary was a profound moment, filled with overwhelming love and joy. He was perfect, from his tiny fingers to the tufts of dark hair that mirrored his father's. In a burst of emotion, I sent a photo of Zachary to my parents, hoping it might bridge the distance between us. However, their silence was deafening. Terry, noticing my disappointment, reassured me, "They'll come around." How could they resist this little guy? I tried to keep my spirits focused on our little family. As the months passed and Zachary grew, I felt a strong desire to return to work. I managed to find a part-time position as a manager at a local boutique, which seemed like the perfect balance. My days became a whirlwind of feeding Zachary, managing work, running the household, and collapsing into bed at night, ready to repeat it all the next day. As Zachary approached his first birthday, I noticed a change in Terry. He became distant, often returning home later than usual and constantly absorbed in his phone. Concerned, I approached him one evening. "Is everything okay at work?" I asked. His reply was brief and distracted. "Yeah, just busy with a big project." But his avoidance of eye contact and the unsettled feeling in my gut told me something was amiss. Our life seemed complete on the surface, with a beautiful son, a lovely home, and good jobs. But the unease grew. One evening, as I was tucking Zachary into bed, Terry's tone became serious, unlike his usual self. "Pamela, we need to talk," he said, cornering me in the nursery. He suggested I quit my job, claiming the house was a mess and Zachary needed more attention. I was stunned. Quitting my job was the last thing I wanted. I loved my work and felt we were managing fine. Terry insisted, "I'm the man of this house, and I'm telling you it's time to quit." We argued well into the night, but eventually I relented, convincing myself it was for our family's best. With a heavy heart, I resigned the next day. I threw myself into my new full-time role at home, cleaning, cooking, and playing with Zachary, trying to find fulfillment in the rhythm of daily life. But as days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in our relationship, a gap that was slowly widening. As time passed, I increasingly missed the structure and fulfillment my job had offered. Terry's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He would come home later each night, sometimes reeking of alcohol. I also noticed unusual withdrawals from our bank account that alarmed me. One evening, while folding laundry, I decided to confront him. "Terry, where is all our money going? We're barely making ends meet," I asked, trying to keep my tone even. His reaction was explosive. "Maybe if you knew how to budget properly, we wouldn't have this problem." I was taken aback by his outburst. It was as if he had become a stranger. From there, things only deteriorated. Terry started to criticize everything I did. The house was never clean enough. The meals I cooked weren't satisfying, and according to him, I wasn't giving enough attention to Zachary. The situation reached a breaking point when Zachary fell ill with a severe flu, feverish, and inconsolable for days. Exhausted after 2 sleepless nights, I pleaded with Terry, "Please, can you take a day off work to help with Zachary? I'm exhausted." His response was cold and dismissive. "Take a day off? Are you kidding? Some of us actually have to work for a living, Pamela." The following day, he came home with a suitcase. "I'm going to a hotel for a few days. I need to rest after work, not listen to a screaming kid," he declared. I stood in disbelief as he walked out the door, leaving me alone to manage everything. As the door slammed shut, I collapsed to the floor with Zachary in my arms, overwhelmed by the turn our lives had taken. The man who once adored me seemed to have vanished. At that moment, I desperately missed my parents. I longed to call them, to hear my mother's calming voice and feel my father's protective embrace, but pride and a sense of shame held me back. How could I admit that they might have been right about Terry all along? As I rocked Zachary, soothing his cries and my tears, my father's words echoed in my mind. "He's not the man you think he is, Pamela." The days that followed Terry's departure were a blur of sleepless nights and exhausting days. Thankfully, Zachary's fever eventually subsided. As he recovered, I had more time to think, perhaps too much time. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something fundamentally wrong with my marriage. When Terry returned from the hotel a week later, he was a changed man, distant, irritable, and seemingly resentful towards both Zachary and me. One evening, he arrived home earlier than usual with a serious look on his face and clutching some papers. "Pamela, we need to talk about insurance," he announced, sitting at the kitchen table. He explained that he had taken out a life insurance policy for $3 million on himself and suggested I do the same. "It's for Zachary's future, in case anything happens to either of us. Don't you want to make sure he's taken care of?" he reasoned. While his words made sense, the whole scenario felt unsettling. $3 million, Terry? That seems excessive, especially since I don't work outside the home anymore, I responded cautiously. His eyes hardened as he replied, "It's for Zachary's future." Despite my reservations, I could only nod slowly, agreeing to consider it if he truly believed it was the best course of action. However, deep inside, I remained troubled by the whole situation, feeling that something just wasn't right. Over the next few days, I watched Terry grow increasingly peculiar. He was glued to his phone, sending texts at odd hours, and would abruptly leave the room to answer calls, often locking himself away in our home office. One morning, after he had left for work, I reached a breaking point. The uncertainty gnawing at me was unbearable. I needed clarity. Trembling, I searched online for help and found the number for CC Top Private Investigations. A gruff voice greeted me. "CC Top Private Investigations, how can I help you?" Taking a deep breath, I stammered, "I need someone to follow my husband. I think he might be cheating." The investigator seemed to understand my hesitation. "I see, ma'am. Why don't you come into our office, and we can discuss the details?" That afternoon, with Zachary napping peacefully, I met with an investigator named Emma, a straightforward, attentive woman. I poured out my concerns, Terry's secretive late-night phone calls, and his drastic behavior change. Emma took meticulous notes and reassured me, "We'll get to the bottom of this, Mrs. Roy. I'll have my best person on it. Leaving her office, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Part of me clung to hope that this was all a misunderstanding, but deep down, I feared that the truth would alter my life irrevocably. 2 weeks later, Emma called with the investigation results, her voice somber. Mrs. Roy, we have the report ready. You might want to sit down for this. My heart thudded as I sank into a chair, bracing myself. I'm ready. Tell me everything. As Emma detailed the findings, my world shattered. Terry had been unfaithful. He had a mistress. The evidence was overwhelming. Photographs, text messages, hotel receipts. It was all irrefutably laid out before me. The next morning, after Terry left for work, I sprang into action. With shaking hands, I packed a bag for Zachary and me, just the essentials. Clothes, diapers, some of Zachary's favorite toys. The family photos on the walls, once precious memories, now felt like painful eyes. We're going to see Grandma and Grandpa, I told Zachary as I strapped him into a stroller. He giggled, blissfully unaware of the chaos. Opting for the metro to avoid rush hour traffic, I headed to my parents' house. As we approached the station, my mind raced with plans for our future. That's when disaster struck. Crossing the street, I heard the screech of tires. In a heartbeat, I pushed Zachary's stroller to safety, only to be hit by the car myself. Pain overwhelmed me, and then darkness enveloped me. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital room surrounded by the steady beeping of machines. There, looking worn and anxious, was Terry. Zachary? I managed to croak, my throat parched with fear. He's fine, Pamela, Terry reassured me, squeezing my hand. He's with Bella, your best friend. Not a scratch on him. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by pain. Glancing down, I saw both my legs encased in casts. Terry explained softly, you have multiple fractures in both legs. The doctors say it'll take about a year for you to fully recover. You'll need to use a wheelchair for a while. Closing my eyes, I tried to absorb this devastating news, grappling with the reality of a long, challenging recovery ahead. In the disorienting haze of the hospital, a sudden clarity struck me, and I remembered the profound reason behind my presence at that metro station. I know about her, I blurted out, my eyes wide open, scrutinizing Terry's reaction. Your mistress. I know everything. Terry's face lost color for an instant. He seemed on the verge of denial, but then his shoulders drooped. Pamela, it wasn't serious. It was a stupid mistake, he stammered. His next words came in a rush. When I got the call about your accident, I realized how close I came to losing you. I can't lose you. Please, can we start over? Give me another chance. I'll do better, I promise. Looking at him, this man I had shared so much with, he appeared genuinely remorseful, and I felt an overwhelming exhaustion from all the recent chaos. Okay, I found myself saying, we can try. The day I was discharged from the hospital felt like a dream. Terry arrived with a bouquet of pink peonies, my favorite, his smile carrying a mix of genuine concern and love. As he wheeled me out, hope flickered within me. Maybe, just maybe, we could salvage our relationship. The initial weeks back home were surprisingly pleasant. Terry was attentive and caring, helping me with daily activities and treating me with a tenderness that reminded me of our happier days. One evening, while we relaxed on the couch, he proposed an idea with a hopeful gleam in his eyes. Nina, I've been thinking, he began, holding my hand gently. We should get away for a weekend, just the two of us, to celebrate your recovery and, well, us. Really? Where? I asked, my heart fluttering with a mix of anticipation and nerves. I found a cozy little house in the mountains, overlooking a beautiful canyon. What do you say? His suggestions sounded idyllic. That sounds wonderful, but what about Zachary? And I'm in a wheelchair. I'm sure Bella wouldn't mind watching him for a couple of days. About the wheelchair, if anything, I'll carry you in my arms. Come on, it'll be good for us. I agreed, swayed by his enthusiasm and the prospect of reconnecting. The drive to the mountain retreat was serene, winding through scenic vistas that eased the tension from the past months. The cabin was as charming as promised, secluded, with stunning views of the canyon. After settling in, Terry suggested exploring the area. "Why don't you rest? I'll check out the surroundings," he said, leaving me to unwind. Alone, I decided to check my emails, which I hadn't done since before the accident. Unable to find my phone, I wheeled over to Terry's laptop. As I opened the browser, an email notification caught my eye. It was from an unfamiliar address, but the subject line chilled me to the bone. Urgent. New information about your case. With trembling hands, I opened the message. It was from Emma, the private investigator I had hired weeks ago. My heart raced as I read her urgent words. "Mrs. Roy, I've been trying to reach you. Your number is out of service. I've uncovered disturbing new information. You're in danger. Your husband was involved in your accident. He's trying to get rid of you for the insurance money." The world seemed to stop spinning as the gravity of her words sank in. The serene escape Terry had planned suddenly felt sinister, and every moment with him flashed through my mind under this new, horrifying light. As I sat at the laptop, my world unraveled. The message from Emma, the private investigator, was damning. It contained evidence of Terry's betrayal, photos, videos, and texts that painted a grim picture. There were images of Terry with his mistress, bank statements with large withdrawals, and a grainy video that caught a woman, strikingly similar to Terry's assistant, behind the wheel of a car just before the accident. Overwhelmed, I quickly shut the laptop as Terry walked in. I tried to appear calm, though my heart pounded against my ribs. "Everything okay, Nina?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes scrutinizing. "Yeah, I can't find my phone. Have you seen it?" I managed, my voice quivering slightly.
"Oh, that?"
"It broke down suddenly. Must have been damaged in the accident," he replied, a cold smile flickering across his face. A shiver of fear ran through me. I needed to reach out for help. But how? "Terry," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Could I borrow your phone? I want to check on Zachary and see how he's doing with Bella." He paused, eyeing me for a moment before handing over his phone. "Sure, go ahead. I'll just be right here." With trembling hands, I took the phone. Terry stayed close, watching. I knew I couldn't call the police or even Bella directly. Then, I remembered a conversation with my father years ago about a coded message involving Buddy the bear, a signal for when I couldn't speak freely. Dialing my father's number, I hoped it hadn't changed. When he answered, I spoke with exaggerated cheerfulness. "Hey, Bella, how's everything going? How's Buddy the bear doing?" There was a brief pause. Then my father's voice, disguised in a higher pitch, responded, "Oh, same old, same old. How are you?" Relief washed over me. He understood. "Oh, it's lovely up here," I gushed, aware of Terry's eyes on me. "We're at this beautiful cabin, 147 Pine Ridge Road. The view of Evergreen Canyon is just stunning." "I see," my father replied cautiously. "When do you think you'll be back?" "Oh, I dream of seeing you right now, this very second," I said emphatically. "I miss you guys already." After a few more pleasantries, I ended the call. Terry seemed satisfied, suspecting nothing. As evening approached, Terry suggested a walk. "The sunset over the canyon is beautiful."
"We shouldn't miss it," he said.
Fear clutched at my heart, but I had no choice. "That sounds nice," I managed to say weakly. Terry wheeled me out onto a narrow path that skirted the canyon's edge. The view was indeed breathtaking. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, and the canyon stretched endlessly before us. But all I could think about was the sheer drop just feet away. As Terry pushed my wheelchair, he chatted about the scenery as if everything was normal. I closed my eyes and prayed silently, desperately hoping my father would find me in time. The path curved one last time, and suddenly we were at the edge of the cliff. Terry turned my chair around to face him. The loving facade he'd maintained until now crumbled, revealing a cold, detached expression. "Pamela," he said, his voice chilling, "I'm really sorry it had to come to this. The car accident was supposed to take care of everything, but you just had to survive, didn't you?" My blood ran cold as the full reality of my situation hit me. "Terry, please," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Don't do this. He laughed mirthlessly. Do you have any idea how perfect this is? A tragic accident at a scenic overlook. Your wheelchair rolls off the edge when the brakes fail. I'll be the grieving widower, inherit your apartment, and cash in that $3 million insurance policy. It's foolproof. As he spoke, he inched my wheelchair closer to the edge. I closed my eyes, silently praying for a miracle. Suddenly, the air filled with the sound of shouts and the rapid pounding of footsteps. My eyes snapped open just in time to see my father sprinting down the path, several police officers hot on his heels. "Pamela," my father cried out, his voice laced with urgency. Just as Terry was about to push my wheelchair over the edge, my father reached us, grabbing the handles and pulling me back from the precipice. The ensuing moments were a chaotic blur. The police swiftly tackled Terry to the ground, reading him his rights as they handcuffed him. Trembling uncontrollably, I watched, barely processing the close call, as the grim reality of what had nearly happened washed over me. My father knelt beside me, his arms pulling me into a tight embrace. Overwhelmed, I broke down, tears streaming as I sobbed into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Dad," I choked out between sobs. "You were right about him. I should have listened to you." He stroked my hair gently, his voice thick with emotion. "No, sweetheart. I'm the one who should be sorry. We let our pride keep us apart. Can you forgive us for not being there for you and Zachary?" My response was a silent nod, my tears speaking volumes as we held each other, letting years of hurt and misunderstanding dissolve in that long, poignant moment. In the weeks that followed, my life took a sharp turn. I filed for divorce, and with the overwhelming evidence arrayed against him, Terry was sentenced to prison for attempted murder, alongside his mistress who had driven the car in the original accident. The apartment, now a repository of painful memories, was sold. In its place, I bought a new home close to an excellent school for Zachary and just a few blocks from my parent house. During my rehabilitation, I moved back in with my parents. It was a year of profound healing, both physically and emotionally. My parents doted on Zachary, seizing the opportunity to make up for lost time with their grandson. Gradually, amidst the love and care of my family, I began to trust again, to smile again, to hope again. As I rebuilt my life from the ashes of my past, I found strength in the renewed bonds with my family and the promise of new beginnings. Today marked my 33rd birthday. I woke up to the familiar aches of my chronic illness, a relentless presence since my childhood. As the CEO of a flourishing tech startup, I often buried these discomforts under a mountain of work and constant coffee, but today felt unusually oppressive. It pushed me to visit the private clinic, almost a second home to me, where I was well acquainted with the staff. Among them was Mason, the young nurse whose charm and ready smile made many patients, including myself, a bit smitten. He greeted me with a bright, "Happy birthday, Jennifer," as I entered, reminding me that I wasn't alone in my struggles. Despite my appreciation, I sighed, the complexities of my condition weighing on me as I settled onto the clinic bed. Mason, ever the optimist, busied himself with preparations, undeterred by my circumstances. "I don't care about your illness, Jennifer. I like you," he said, his sincerity clear. As he attended to the charts, I forced myself to focus on the brighter aspects of my life, my independence and achievements, though loneliness shadowed my successes. The day unfolded with routine tests and consultations. By late afternoon, ready to retreat to my solitude, Mason intervened with a birthday dinner invitation. Reluctantly, I agreed, setting the boundary of just as friends, to which he acquiesced, though his eyes sparkled with something more. Dinner with Mason broke the monotony of my daily routines. We chatted about everything but my health, movies, travel, food, making me feel wonderfully normal. Walking me to my car afterward, Mason reiterated his earlier offer to be there for me, his earnestness illuminated by the streetlights. The complexities of my life loomed large, yet here was Mason, ready to embrace all of it. "Let's take it slow," I suggested, not fully prepared to dive in but intrigued by the possibility of not facing life's challenges alone. As I drove home, his words lingered, and I considered that maybe, just maybe, I could allow myself the sliver of happiness. 5 months later, Mason and I had grown closer, each moment together soothing the persistent pain of my condition. Despite my reservations about our future, given my health, Mason remained steadfast. On a crisp autumn evening, as the city blazed with the hues of fall, Mason suggested a stroll through the park post-dinner. His next words, though slightly shaky, were simple and heartfelt, reflecting the genuine depth of his feelings. "I've been reflecting on our relationship and how genuinely happy you make me. I've come to realize that I want us to be together indefinitely." As Mason spoke these words, my heart skipped a beat. "Mason, are you certain about this? You know my health issues won't make things easier," I cautioned. Mason responded with conviction. "I know, and I'm ready for all of it. The good days, the tough days, and everything in between." He then pulled out a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a modest, yet stunning ring. "Jennifer, will you marry me?" he asked. His proposal took me by surprise. Although I loved him deeply, the idea of such a commitment had seemed beyond my reach due to my health complications. Yet, seeing him there, so certain about our future, my reservations began to melt away. "Yes, Mason, I'll marry you," I replied, and we embraced, momentarily shutting out the world around us. It felt perfectly right. The weeks that followed were filled with excitement and planning. We opted for a simple wedding, something intimate with close friends and family, including his sister and her husband. However, before diving into the celebratory preparations, I knew we needed to discuss some practical aspects of our future. One evening, I sat down with Mason and presented a prenuptial agreement I had prepared. "I need to talk about something practical, especially considering my business and health," I explained. Mason nodded understandingly. I handed him the documents. After scanning them briefly, he looked up and smiled. "If this makes you feel secure, I'm all for it. I'm not here for the money, Jennifer. I'm here for you," he said. "Are you sure?" I needed confirmation once more. "Absolutely," he assured me, signing the document without hesitation. "Now, can we get back to planning our little wedding?" "Yes, we can," I replied, a mix of relief and love washing over me. Mason's acceptance of the prenup reassured me about his intentions and commitment. Our wedding day was simple yet perfect. Held at City Hall with only our dearest present, it was everything we wanted. Standing there exchanging vows with Mason, I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps life was granting me a chance at something truly beautiful, despite the challenges. Life after our quaint wedding initially seemed nearly ideal. Mason took on managing our household, transforming our home into a haven of delicious aromas and impeccable tidiness. The honeymoon phase appeared to extend well beyond expectations. However, about a year later, subtle changes began to emerge. Mason's zest for household activities diminished, and he became somewhat reclusive. Initially, I attributed this to the natural adjustments of living together or the end of our extended honeymoon period. But the change was noticeable. One afternoon, I returned home early, eager to surprise him with news of a potential new client. Expecting to find him busy in the kitchen or doing chores, I instead found the house eerily silent. Confused, I walked towards the kitchen and stopped as I heard a voice, a cheerful, unfamiliar woman's voice. Pushing the door open, I found a middle-aged woman humming as she chopped vegetables. She looked up, startled. "Oh, you must be Jennifer. I'm Amy. Mason didn't mention you'd be home this early," she introduced herself. "Who exactly are you?" I asked, managing to keep my voice steady despite the surprise. "I'm the housekeeper. Mason hired me about a year ago. I come in a few times a week to clean up and cook. Makes things easier, you know?" She smiled, obviously oblivious to the shock she had just delivered. A housekeeper for a year, and I had no idea? A mix of anger and betrayal began to simmer within me, but I maintained my composure. Right, I see. Thank you, Amy. Could you give us a moment, please? Of course, she said, wiping her hands and leaving the room. When Mason returned home, he found me in the living room, a storm of emotions brewing inside me. His face dropped as soon as he saw my expression. Who's Amy, Mason? I asked bluntly. Mason hesitated, then sighed. She's the housekeeper. Look, I meant to tell you, but I thought you'd be upset about me not doing the housework myself. Upset, Mason? Do you think I'd be upset about who cleans or cooks? I'm upset because you lied because you thought this was something you had to hide, I said, my voice rising with each word. I know, and I'm sorry. It started small, and then I just didn't know how to bring it up without making it a big deal. It seemed easier to just keep it going, he explained, looking genuinely remorseful. Easier for who, Mason? Because this doesn't feel easy for me, I shot back. We spent the night discussing it. He apologized, and I tried to see his perspective, but a small crack had formed between us, making me wonder what else he might be keeping from me. Things seemed to smooth over a bit after that night, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Mason continued to handle the dinner and keep the house in order, but now I knew he wasn't the one doing the work. It felt like our roles were defined. I worked and he managed the home, except he didn't manage it. He outsourced it. However, it wasn't just the hidden housekeeper issue that bothered me. Mason's behavior had changed. His late-night whispers on the phone, his newfound need for privacy, and his constant requests for more money, it all pointed to something more troubling. So, I did what any resourceful woman would do. I hired a private detective. It wasn't long before I had the results, and they weren't what I had hoped for. Mason was spending most of his days at a casino, and the amount of money he was losing was staggering. That evening, as Mason walked into the living room, I was waiting for him, the detective's report in hand. He tried to greet me with a kiss, but I stepped back, holding up the papers. Care to explain this? I asked, my voice cold and composed. Mason collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. I didn't mean for it to get this out of hand. It started as just a way to blow off some steam, but it got bigger and I didn't know how to stop. And you thought the best way to handle it was to lie?
To steal from me.
My voice rose, my temper flaring. I'm sorry, Jennifer, so sorry. I need help. I want to quit, I swear. I need your help to get out of this mess, he pleaded, his voice desperate. I took a deep breath, seeking solace within myself. Mason, I'll assist you this time, but it has to be the last. You need professional help for your addiction, and you must acknowledge the debt I'm clearing for you. It's $75,000, I explained, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mason nodded, his expression one of sheer misery. Yes, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll get the help, he agreed. We made plans for his treatment to begin the next week, hoping this could Arthur a new start. However, just as a semblance of normalcy seemed possible, Mason blindsided me with an unthinkable suggestion. Jennifer, what if we have a baby? It might bring us closer, he proposed out of nowhere. I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. A baby, Mason? You know that's not just risky. It could be fatal for me. He backpedaled quickly. I know. It was just a thought. Forget I mentioned it. Yet the idea lingered and kept surfacing. Even his sister, an obstetrician, phoned to press the issue. You should reconsider, Jennifer. Having a baby is natural. Don't be selfish, she urged. Her words angered me. You're a doctor. You understand my condition. How can you even suggest such a thing? I retorted, then ended the call, my heart pounding with fury. The ensuing months were filled with tension and unresolved conflicts that wore me down. Nothing, however, could have prepared me for what awaited when I returned home unexpectedly early one day, craving a quiet evening. Instead, I opened the door to find chaos. Boxes everywhere. Mason's sister Megan and her husband Arthur were moving their belongings into our living room. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, my voice slicing through the noise. Megan turned calmly. "Oh, we're moving in, Jennifer. This is Mason's place, and you should start packing," she stated flatly. My gaze shot to Mason, looking for any sign of confusion or disagreement. There was none. He met my gaze with a cold, detached expression. "Jennifer, I can't do this anymore. You've been manipulative and controlling. It's over," he declared. I was dumbfounded. "Manipulating you, Mason? What are you talking about?" "You heard him," Arthur added sharply. Mason stepped forward, divorce papers in hand. "I'm also seeking compensation for emotional abuse and alimony. I need to take care of myself now." The room spun as I took the papers, the words a blur of betrayal. But a surge of resolve washed over me. I laughed, a hollow sound. "You're in for a surprise. But go ahead, think what you want. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Without another word, I went to our bedroom, packed essentials, and prepared to leave. There was no point in arguing. The man I had married was a stranger now. I drove away, heading to the elite cottage village where I owned a home, a sanctuary I had bought long before meeting Mason. As I passed the familiar gates, nodding at the guards, a sense of relief washed over me. The house was exactly as I had left it, spacious, quiet, and perfectly suited to my needs, a haven prepared for whatever the future might hold. That evening, I made calls to my closest friends, updating them on the situation and reassuring them of my well-being. I was feeling composed as my lawyer, and I prepared to discuss our approach. Mason's wild accusations would not go unanswered. A few days after I had settled into my peaceful haven, I was jolted by a frenzied phone call from Mason. His voice, tinged with panic and anger, filled the room. "Jennifer, you've set me up. This is some twisted game to you, isn't it?" With a serene smile, I responded calmly, "Mason, if there's been a misunderstanding, why don't we discuss it in person? Come over and we can talk. I'll send you the address." Soon after, the gates of the village swung open, and Mason, along with Megan and her husband Arthur, drove in. From my window, I observed as they pulled up, their faces glued to the car windows, eyes wide at the sight of my expansive residence. As they approached my front door, their earlier confidence seemed to diminish. Opening the door, I had to cough to break the silence before greeting them with a wry smile. "Well, what brings you to my humble abode?" Regaining some of his earlier bravado, Mason blurted out, "Your lawyer called me. He said I have to pay next month's rent for the apartment, $50,000. You never told me it wasn't your apartment." "You never asked," I replied with measured patience. "And if you want to stay in that apartment, you'll need to pay the rent." Megan, ever the opportunist, chimed in, nudging Mason. "And what about this place? It's gorgeous. Why don't you just give us this house instead of the apartment? Otherwise, we'll sue you for everything you've got." Their audacity was almost amusing. I burst into laughter. "You want to sue me for this house? Mason, dear, I bought this house long before you came into the picture. You have no claim over it whatsoever." Their faces flushed with frustration, and the shouting escalated. "You can't just kick us out. We have rights." Mason yelled. "That's where you're wrong," I countered, my voice firm as I picked up the phone. "Security, could you please escort these people out? They seem to be lost." Within minutes, village security arrived, and the trio was promptly shown out. Their indignant protests dwindled into the distance, leaving a serene quiet that enveloped the house like a soothing blanket. Once they had left, I sat back down, the laughter replaced by a weary sigh. It was evident that Mason and his sister were desperately trying to intimidate me into surrendering what was rightfully mine. I called my lawyer again, detailing the day's confrontations. "We need to be prepared for whatever they might try next," I told him, my tone resolute. "Don't worry, Jennifer. We can handle this. They have no legal standing," he reassured me. The day of the court hearing arrived with palpable tension. I walked into the courtroom, my lawyer by my side, ready to face whatever Mason and his family had concocted. The allegations were absurd. Mason claimed I had exploited him, turning him into what he melodramatically referred to as my slave. He recounted tales of endless chores and a thankless life under my supposed tyranny, while Megan and Arthur vigorously nodded, supporting his every word. I barely resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Fortunately, it was soon our turn to present the truth. My lawyer stood, adjusting his suit jacket with calm assurance. "Your Honor, we have evidence that contradicts every one of Mr. Mason's claims," he stated confidently. Then he turned to call our first witness, the au pair Mason had hired, who stepped forward to share her perspective. "I served as a housekeeper in Mr. Mason's home, handling all the domestic duties and preparing meals, while he rarely participated in any chores, according to my testimony and supported by employment documents and payroll records." These showed that Mason's claims of contributing to housework were exaggerated. During the court proceedings, my attorney brought forth our prenuptial agreement. This contract, which both of us had signed, clearly stated that in the event of our divorce, Mason would not be entitled to any financial support or property settlement. The courtroom fell silent as the implications of the agreement were understood. Mason paled when my lawyer questioned him, revealing that he had not fully read the document he signed, which primarily focused on my welfare. Moreover, my lawyer also presented evidence of Mason's gambling debts, which I had settled out of my pocket and for which Mason had signed an acknowledgement. As the judge made her ruling, granting the divorce and denying Mason any claims to alimony or compensation, a wave of relief swept over me. However, this feeling was short-lived. Outside the courtroom, Mason's sister Megan angrily scolded him, revealing their ulterior motives that included not only securing my wealth, but also my untimely demise. In the months following, I began rebuilding my life, focusing on my well-being and my business. One morning, while enjoying a coffee and reviewing business documents, Mason unexpectedly appeared at my house. He looked worn and desperate. I let him in, curious yet wary of his intentions. Upon facing me, he dropped to his knees, dramatically begging for forgiveness and pleading for a chance to return to my life, offering to do any household task if only I'd let him stay. I listened, unmoved by his display of regret. Mason tried to shift some blame to Megan, claiming it was her idea to drive their scheme forward. Despite his pleas, I stood firm, explaining that the real issue was not just about who concocted the plan or what exactly happened, but about the fundamental lack of trust that could not be easily restored. "You shattered our trust irreparably. Not only did you go along with Megan's plans, but you also fully knew the dangers her schemes posed to me." Mason scrambled to his feet, reaching out as though he could physically restore our once cherished relationship. "Jennifer, I'm lost without you. I've taken out a loan to repay the $75,000, and I've started working again. I'm trying to fix my mistakes," he said desperately. "But fixing your mistakes doesn't mean you can just undo the past and its consequences," I told him sharply. "What you need to understand, Mason, is that you chose this path. Now you must walk it alone." His face fell, and for a moment I almost felt pity for him almost. But then I recalled the cold, calculating discussions about my health and potential demise. "I want you to leave now," I said firmly. "And Mason, don't come back. You are not welcome here, not now, not ever." When he hesitated, still trying to gather words for another plea, I turned and signaled to the security personnel who had discreetly stayed nearby. They stepped forward, escorting him away as he called out my name, his cries fading into the distance. After he was gone, I stood at the doorway for a few moments, letting the stillness envelop me once more. This house, this life, I had built it, and I would not let anyone threaten it again. I returned to my morning routine, the disturbance now settling into a resolved chapter of my life. Looking ahead, my thoughts turned to future plans, dreams of travel, and meeting new people. The world was vast, and my heart, once weighed down by betrayal, now felt lighter, buoyed by the possibilities ahead.